Hey guys and welcome back to my channel. This is part 8 of What If Naruto Was in Code Geass. Before we begin, don't forget to like, share and subscribe, and also go and support the author, link in description. The submarine cut through the dark waters in eerie silence, its engines humming like some great beast prowling beneath the sea. Inside, the atmosphere among the Black Knights was anything but calm. Inoue stood at her station, eyes fixed on the instruments as she monitored their course. Behind her, gathered in the command chamber, the core members of the Black Knights waited as Zero began reorganizing the structure of the entire organization. Zero stood at the front, cape still, voice measured. "We can no longer function as a loose coalition of resistance groups," he said. "From this point on, the Black Knights will operate as a unified military and political body. That requires a proper chain of command." Todo stood with his arms folded, expression unreadable. Zero turned slightly toward him. "Lieutenant General Todo. From this point forward, you will oversee military affairs." Todo gave a single nod. "Understood." Zero shifted his attention. "Diethard Reed will take charge of intelligence, espionage, and public relations." That immediately drew objections. Chiba's eyes narrowed. "You're giving that much authority to a Britannian." Diethard smiled faintly, as though he found the concern flattering. Zero did not waver. "His nationality is irrelevant. His usefulness is not." Chiba looked dissatisfied, but Todo lifted a hand slightly, and she held her tongue. "Konami Ogi," Zero continued, "you will serve as deputy director." Ogi blinked in surprise. Several of the older resistance members brightened immediately at the announcement, their approval plain. "Ogi-san." Tamaki blurted out. "See. I knew it." Ogi looked more burdened than honored, but he nodded anyway. "I'll do my best." Zero turned once more. "Rakshata Chala will oversee research and development." Rakshata, reclining with her usual lazy grace, smiled. What a troublesome amount of responsibility." "And finally," Zero said, "the Zero Squad." Colin straightened almost unconsciously. "My elite personal force," Zero said. "Its commander will be Colin Kazuki." For 1 second Colin forgot the rest of the room existed. "Understood," she said, and though her tone remained even, there was unmistakable pride in it. Zero went on, assigning Asahina, Senba, and Kagesaki to the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd divisions. Tamaki, to his immense delight, was given command of 2nd Special Forces. Tamaki practically swelled with importance. Finally. Colin only half listened after that. Part of her was still caught on the honor Zero had given her. And part of her was somewhere else entirely. With Naruto. She wished he were here. Not because she needed his approval, though if she was honest, a part of her probably did, but because after everything that had happened between them, after what they had finally admitted, she found herself wanting him there for the moments that mattered. Instead, he was at that damned ceremony. And worse, apparently engaged now by royal decree. Colin kept her expression neutral, but she was lightly upset about it in a way she didn't want to examine too closely. Not angry with Naruto. Never that. Just upset at the whole situation. At the Emperor. At Britannia. At the idea that Naruto could be pushed into something like that, like he was just another political asset to be moved around. She clicked her tongue softly under her breath. Rakshata's lazy voice broke into her thoughts. "And what about her?" Colin asked suddenly, glancing toward CC. "She doesn't have any position." Several eyes shifted toward the green-haired woman. CC looked supremely uninterested. "I'm touched you care." Zero answered before anyone else could. CC operates outside the standard chain of command. Colin frowned faintly, but before she could ask more, Diethard stepped forward. "There is another matter," he said. Zero looked toward him. "Speak." The knighting ceremony was everything Suzaku had never wanted. Grand. Formal. Public. And filled with people whose approval he neither had nor needed, though that did nothing to lessen the hostility radiating from the gathered nobility and officials. As Suzaku walked down the aisle in his ceremonial uniform, the whispers reached him easily. "An 11. They're actually making him a knight. Why are they even broadcasting this?" One woman muttered under her breath, not quite quietly enough, "I wonder if Princess Euphemia simply has Personal needs are rather something to fill the void until it's time. Suzaku's jaw tightened, but he kept walking. He would not give them the satisfaction of seeing him falter. From one of the guest sections, Mito watched with narrowed eyes, visibly restraining herself from doing something that would probably scandalize half the room. Beside her, Kushina looked equally unimpressed. If one more person says something like that, Kushina murmured, I'm going to need Minato to hold me back. Minato, seated beside her with Naruto on his other side, replied mildly, I was already planning on it. Naruto's gaze remained fixed on Suzaku, and his expression was harder than usual. Mito leaned slightly toward the aisle as Suzaku passed, and though she didn't call out, she gave him the smallest smile, quiet, proud, and meant only for him. Suzaku caught it. And for just a second, the tension in his chest eased. At the front of the hall, Euphemia stood waiting in formal regalia, every inch the princess, though Naruto, watching from the audience, could see the strain in her eyes. The ceremony proceeded with all the pomp Britannia could force into it. Then came the moment itself. Euphemia stepped forward and, with clear voice and steady hands, declared, from this day forward, Suzaku Kururugi shall be recognized as my knight. Rise, Sir Suzaku Kururugi. Suzaku rose. And for a moment, no one applauded. The silence was awful. Then Lloyd, of all people, began clapping cheerfully. Cecile leaned closer to someone near her and said dryly, he's applauding because Suzaku still belongs to his department. A second later Darlton began clapping as well, slower, more measured. That finally forced the rest of the room into reluctant applause. Naruto sat back in his chair, expression unreadable. Mito exhaled softly, her gaze never leaving Suzaku. Kushina, meanwhile, was only half watching the ceremony now, because she was still deeply hung up on the official announcement circulated earlier that day. The one that had stated Naruto Namikaze and Princess Euphemia were apparently set to be engaged. Naruto remembered exactly how that conversation had gone. It had happened only hours before the ceremony. He had stormed into Minato's office without knocking. You've got to be kidding me, Naruto said. Minato looked up from behind his desk, expression already knowing. I take it you saw the decree. Naruto stopped in front of the desk, furious. Saw it. Dad, it says I'm being set up to marry Yuffie. Minato sighed. I know. Naruto stared at him in disbelief. Then do something. Minato's expression sharpened slightly. Naruto. Naruto's hands clenched. I'm serious. I'm with Colin. You know that. Mom knows that. Hell, probably half the damn settlement knows that. Minato stood and came around the desk. This was not my decision, he said evenly. And it was not Euphemia's either. Naruto froze. Minato continued, quieter now. The Emperor issued the decree. That makes this bigger than family, bigger than the company, and bigger than what either of you want right now. Naruto looked sickened by that. You're saying I'm just supposed to accept it? No, Minato said. I'm saying this is not something you solve by yelling at me. That only made Naruto angrier, but there was truth in it, and they both knew it. Minato put a hand on his son's shoulder. We'll deal with it, he said. But understand what it is first. This isn't about romance. It's politics. Naruto's face twisted. That doesn't make it better. No, Minato agreed. It doesn't. Back in the present, the ceremony ended and the audience began to disperse into murmuring clusters of approval, outrage, curiosity, and calculation. Far away, in the Black Knight's submarine, Diethard finished delivering the second piece of his report. Now that Suzaku is a knight, he said, he's more than just a soldier. He's a symbol. Todo remained silent. Diethard paced slightly as he continued. He will become the face of Japanese willing to support Britannia. And for Britannians, he becomes a convenient prop, a way to pretend they support 11s without changing anything meaningful. His eyes sharpened. Which means he is dangerous. Rakshata exhaled a stream of smoke. He'll be troublesome, yes. Ogi frowned immediately. You're not suggesting. I am, Diethard said. Assassinate him. Todo's expression hardened. No. Ogi turned fully toward Diethard. Suzaku is not our enemy in the way Britannia is. He is now a pillar of Britannian influence, Diethard replied. That makes him a legitimate target. Rakshata shrugged one shoulder. Strategically, he is a problem. And morally, Ogi shot back. Rakshata only smiled faintly. I rarely start there. Toto cut in before the argument could escalate further. Suzaku Kururugi is a man caught in impossible circumstances. I won't support murdering him for serving as a symbol. All eyes turned to Zero. He said nothing for several moments. Then, at last, I'll decide. Later, alone in his room, Lelouch stood by the window while CC watched him from the bed. You're brooding again, she said. Lelouch didn't look at her. Suzaku's position changes things. CC tilted her head. Then why not just use Geass on him? That made him finally turn. Because I won't. CC studied him. Won't. Or can't. Lelouch's eyes narrowed. It's pride, CC said calmly. And friendship. Lelouch looked away again. After a moment, he said, maybe. CC gave a small hum. That might get you killed. And yet I'm still here. Her gaze sharpened slightly. You may not always have the luxury of choosing sentiment over necessity. Lelouch was quiet for a long time after that. Then, more quietly than before, he said, Naruto got engaged today. CC raised a brow. By royal decree. Yes. For the first time that night, Lelouch sounded genuinely tired rather than simply calculating. It doesn't sit right with me, he admitted. Not after everything. Not with Colin. His expression darkened. Britannia has a way of turning even affection into a weapon. CC watched him in silence. Then she said, with rare softness, yes. It does. Lelouch's mouth tightened. And outside the submarine, outside the ceremony halls, outside all their carefully plotted games, the world kept shifting beneath their feet. Cornelia's office was quiet save for the distant hum of the city beyond the glass. Euphemia stood near the center of the room, hands clenched tightly in front of her, trying very hard to keep her voice steady. Cornelia, seated behind her desk, regarded her younger sister with the sort of calm that always made Euphi feel as though she were standing before a wall instead of a person. Why? Euphemia asked at last, her voice trembling despite herself. Why did father have to decree it? Why did he have to announce that Naruto and I are to be engaged? Cornelia's gaze did not soften. You really need to ask. She said coolly. Euphemia blinked. Of course I do. This isn't fair to him. It isn't fair to me. Cornelia leaned back slightly in her chair. If you did not want that to happen, if you did not want to place Naruto Namikaze in this position, then you should never have publicly announced that you loved him. Euphemia recoiled slightly, as if struck. She stopped, looking away. I didn't mean for this. You only spoke from the heart in front of the entire public, Cornelia finished. In front of the press. In front of Britannia. In front of father. Her voice sharpened. You made a declaration that could not be ignored. Euphemia lowered her eyes. I know that. Do you? Cornelia asked. Because it seems to me that you are still thinking like a girl in love instead of a princess. That hurt more because there was truth in it. Euphi drew in a breath. I didn't do it to trap him. I know that, Cornelia said. But intent matters very little once the emperor decides to act. Euphi's hands tightened further. Naruto doesn't belong in this. He didn't ask for any of it. No, Cornelia agreed. He did not. But he has now become entangled all the same. Her eyes narrowed slightly. And if you truly care for him, then you should begin understanding that your feelings have consequences far beyond yourself. Euphemia looked down, swallowing against the ache in her throat. For a brief moment, Cornelia's expression softened. This is no longer only about what you want, she said quietly. Or what he wants. Euphi nodded, though her face made it clear that understanding it did not make it easier to bear. The celebration that evening was supposed to be for Suzaku. Officially, anyway. It had been arranged in honor of his knighting, a chance for the student council to celebrate one of their own in the only way Ashford seemed to know how. Too much food, too much noise, and Millie turning what should have been a simple gathering into something halfway between a party and a public spectacle. But beneath the music and laughter, the mood in the room was not as light as everyone pretended. Suzaku's new title had already drawn enough attention on its own. An honorary Britannian becoming Princess Euphemia's knight was still something people whispered about when they thought no one important was listening. And then there was Naruto. The emperor's decree had changed the way people looked at him. Some were curious. Some were envious. Some were polite in that sharp, poisonous way that made it clear they were already judging him. Every so often, someone would glance toward him. Then toward Suzaku. Then toward the doors, as if waiting for Euphemia herself to appear and turn the day into something even more dramatic. Millie, naturally, was doing her best to overpower the tension through sheer force of personality. Music drifted through the hall. Plates and glasses passed from hand to hand. Students, soldiers, and invited guests mingled beneath warm lights, all smiling just a little too brightly. Shirley was arranging slices of pizza onto a tray when she noticed Colin enter. Colin, she called, brightening. Can you help me with this? Colin barely looked her way. Not right now, she muttered. Shirley frowned. Colin. But before she could ask what was wrong, Mito slipped up beside Suzaku and lightly touched his sleeve. Suzaku, she said softly, can I steal you for a second? Suzaku blinked, then gave her a small smile. Of course. The two of them stepped away from the center of the room together, disappearing toward one of the quieter side halls. Colin noticed immediately. A sharp, ugly feeling twisted in her chest. She told herself it had nothing to do with Mito. Nothing to do with Suzaku. Nothing to do with the way everyone tonight seemed to be moving forward into lives that had been forced onto them, adjusted around them, or chosen for them. Then she saw Naruto. He stood near one of the side tables, a drink untouched in his hand. His expression was calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that made her want to shake him until something real came out. He looked composed. He looked like he was handling it. And for some reason, that only made her angrier. She crossed the room toward him. Naruto. The moment she came close enough, his hand closed around her wrist. Colin barely had time to react before he pulled her with him, guiding her out of the ballroom and into the hall beyond. The music dulled behind them, the warm noise of the party falling away as the doors closed. She stumbled once, then turned sharply on him. What are you? Naruto kissed her. It was sudden. Hard. Desperate enough to steal every word from her mouth. For one heartbeat, Colin's anger vanished under sheer shock. Then her body caught up before her mind did. She kissed him back. Her fingers gripped the front of his shirt, holding on as if she had been waiting for this and hated herself for it. The hallway, the party, the decree, Euphemia, Britannia, all of it blurred into nothing for a few seconds. There was only him. The warmth of him. The way he kissed her like he had been holding himself back for too long. Then they broke apart. Colin was flushed, breathing unevenly, her pulse racing far too fast. Naruto looked no better. His hand still hovered near her wrist, but he did not grab her again. For a moment, he just stared at her. Not with that usual teasing warmth. Not smug. Not playful. Soft. Almost relieved. Colin, he said quietly. Her anger had not disappeared. Not completely. But for a second, it wavered beneath the way he said her name. Naruto stepped closer again, slower this time, as if giving her the chance to pull away. When she didn't, he lifted a hand and brushed a loose strand of hair away from her face. The gesture was so gentle that Colin's breath caught. He looked at her like he was trying to take in every detail. Her eyes. Her mouth. The tension in her brow. The flush still lingering on her cheeks. There was something almost painful in his gaze, something too quiet and too open for her to understand. Like he was memorizing her. Like he was afraid he might lose the chance. Colin's fingers loosened against his shirt, but she did not step back. For one fragile moment, neither of them spoke. The sounds of the party drifted faintly from the ballroom behind them, muffled and distant. Naruto's thumb brushed lightly over her knuckles. I wanted to see you, he admitted, voice low. Just for a minute. Colin looked up at him. The anger in her chest shifted into something messier. Something that hurt more. You could have just said that, she said, softer than she meant to. Naruto gave a faint, humorless smile. Yeah, I'm not really having my best day right now. Despite herself, Colin almost smiled. Then reality crept back in. The ballroom. The decree. Euphemia. The way everyone kept looking at Naruto like he belonged to another world now. Like he belonged to Britannia. Colin's expression tightened again. Naruto, she said, more firmly this time, you don't get to do that. His gaze flicked back to hers. Do what? Kiss me like that after everything that's happened and expect it to fix anything. His expression tightened. I wasn't trying to fix it. Then what were you trying to do? He hesitated. That hesitation made her anger flare back to life. Well, Colin pressed. What was that? Naruto dragged a hand through his hair, frustration rising in his face. I don't know, alright. I saw you and I just. And what? She snapped. Decided dragging me out here would somehow make all of this easier. Naruto's jaw tightened. That's not fair. Colin let out a short, sharp laugh. No. Then what am I supposed to think? Her eyes flashed as she gestured toward the ballroom behind them. Because from where I'm standing, you don't look like someone trying to fight this. You look like someone enjoying it. Naruto blinked. What? This, she hissed. The attention. The title. The way everyone keeps looking at you now. The way you're standing there acting like none of this is bothering you nearly as much as it should. His expression hardened. You think I'm enjoying this? Colin folded her arms, though it did nothing to steady the heat still running through her. I think you're acting like it doesn't matter. Like you can joke your way through it. Like you can stand in that room, smile at all of them, and pretend this isn't happening. I'm not pretending. Then what are you doing? Naruto stared at her for a second, then let out a breath through his nose. You really don't get it. Then explain it to me. For a moment, he looked like he might. His eyes stayed on hers, and Colin saw something flicker there. Something tired. Something almost scared. But he couldn't tell her the truth. He couldn't tell her that his vision had blurred again earlier. That every time it happened now, fear settled a little deeper in his chest. That when he saw her across the room, all he had wanted, for one selfish, stupid second, was to look at her clearly while he still could. So instead, all he said was, I'm dealing with it. Colin's expression did not soften. No, she said. You're burying it. Naruto looked away for half a second, then back at her. And what exactly do you want me to do, Colin? Fall apart in public. I want you to stop acting like none of it touches you. Her voice came out louder than she meant it to. For a moment, the hallway went quiet around them. Colin inhaled sharply and forced her voice lower, though the anger still burned underneath it. You don't get to stand there looking untouchable and then pull me aside like this, she said. Not when I can't tell whether you're actually fighting any of this or just letting it sweep you along because some part of you likes being wanted. Naruto's face changed. Not anger. Something more wounded. Colin. The sound of her name almost made her falter. But then she thought of Euphemia. Of the announcement. Of the way people had stared. Of the future being dragged closer whether any of them wanted it or not. And all the confusion inside her twisted back into anger because anger was easier. She stepped back. Forget it. She turned toward the ballroom, clearly intending to leave him there, but Naruto caught her wrist before she could take more than 2 steps. Colin, stop. She tried to pull free. Let go. No. That made her turn back toward him, eyes narrowing. What now? Naruto held on, not hard enough to hurt her, but firmly enough that she knew he meant it. Don't go, he said. The words came out rougher than he intended. Colin stared at him. For a second, her anger faltered again. He looked at her like he hated that he had said it. Like he hated even more that he meant it. You dragged me out here, Colin said, her voice quieter now, kissed me, picked a fight, and now you're telling me not to leave. That's not what this is. Then what is it? Naruto did not answer right away. His eyes dropped to her face again, just for a second, and something in his expression made her chest tighten. Fear. It was there and gone almost instantly, buried beneath frustration and pride, but she had seen it. Naruto released her wrist slowly. He exhaled and looked away. Forget it. Colin's brows drew together. No. Don't do that. His eyes flicked back to her. She stepped closer again, her voice sharpening. You don't get to pull me into this and then shut down the second I push back. Naruto laughed once under his breath, but there was no humor in it. Yeah. Well, maybe I'm getting really tired of everyone expecting me to have the right answer tonight. Colin held his gaze. For a long second, neither of them moved. Then she said, quieter now, I'm not asking for the right answer. Naruto looked back at her. I'm asking for the real one. That hit harder than she probably meant it to. His throat tightened. For one painful second, he wanted to tell her everything. That he was scared. That he hated the decree. That he hated the way people looked at him now. That he hated how helpless he felt. That his eyes were getting worse, and every time the world blurred, he wondered how long he had left before the people he cared about became nothing but shadows. But the words stayed trapped behind his teeth. And because he said nothing, Colin's expression closed off again. She stepped back. This time, he did not stop her. Fine, she said. Then she turned and walked back toward the ballroom. Just to get away from him. Naruto stood alone in the hall, the taste of her still on his lips and her face burned painfully clear into his mind. He wanted to call after her. He wanted to tell her not to go. He wanted one more minute. But the doors opened, warm music spilled into the hall, and Colin disappeared back into the light without looking back. Back inside the party, Suzaku had only just started to answer whatever Mito had pulled him aside to say when he noticed Lelouch across the room. Lelouch was watching him. Not casually. Not with the usual bored curiosity he wore when Millie's parties became too loud or too ridiculous. His expression was controlled, but there was something behind it that made Suzaku go alert at once. Mito, Suzaku said apologetically, I need a moment. Mito studied him, then followed his gaze. When she saw Lelouch waiting near the edge of the room, her eyes narrowed slightly. For half a second, it looked like she might object. Then she sighed and gave a small nod. Go. Suzaku gave her a grateful look before crossing the room. When he reached Lelouch, he kept his voice low. You wanted to ask me something the other day. What was it? Lelouch looked at him for a moment, his violet eyes unreadable. Then, as if deciding against whatever answer had first come to mind, he said, forget it. Suzaku frowned. Lelouch. Before he could press further, a bright, familiar voice cut smoothly into the conversation. Well, there you are. Lloyd Asplund strolled up with Cecile beside him, looking as casually out of place as ever. His posture was loose, his smile easy, and his timing almost aggressively inconvenient. You have duties, Suzaku, Lloyd said lightly. Princess Euphemia is meeting with someone else at the moment, but she'll want her night present soon. Suzaku nodded automatically. Right. Lelouch, however, went still. His eyes sharpened at once. Meeting with someone else. Before Lelouch could ask anything, Millie swept over in a sea of elegant fabric and suspiciously perfect timing. Is something wrong? She asked, looking between them. No, Suzaku said quickly. Just work. Nina, who had approached more quietly, glanced between Lloyd and Millie with faint confusion. Who exactly is he? Lloyd smiled. Her betrothed. For one second, the room seemed to stop. Millie's face turned bright red. Lloyd. What? He asked innocently. We are rivals, who had arrived just in time to hear the worst possible part of that sentence, let out a strangled sound of despair. No. No, no, no. He pointed at Lloyd like the man had personally destroyed his future. What do you mean betrothed? Lloyd looked at him blankly. Exactly what it sounds like. Rivals looked ready to collapse on the spot. Millie covered her face with both hands. I hate everything. Even Suzaku, distracted as he was, could not help giving Rivals a faint wince of sympathy. But Lelouch was no longer paying attention to any of it. His mind was already moving, fitting the pieces together beneath the noise of the party. Then the ballroom doors opened harder than they should have. Colin stormed back inside. The movement was sharp enough to draw Suzaku's eye immediately. Lelouch noticed it at almost the same time. Colin's face was flushed, her jaw tight, her eyes fixed straight ahead as if looking at anyone for too long might make whatever she was feeling spill over. She moved through the edge of the party without slowing, ignoring Shirley's confused look and Millie's startled glance. Suzaku's brow furrowed. Lelouch's eyes narrowed slightly. Neither of them missed the fact that Naruto did not come in after her. For a brief moment, the laughter and music seemed to thin around them. Suzaku looked toward the hall Colin had emerged from, concern flickering across his face. Lelouch followed that same line of sight, his expression far more calculating. Colin had clearly been with Naruto. And judging by the way she had come back alone, whatever had happened had not gone well. Across the room, beyond the open doors, Naruto remained in the hall. He stood where Colin had left him, half lit by the warm spill of the ballroom behind him, his hand still hanging faintly at his side like he had almost reached after her and stopped himself. The taste of her was still on his lips. Her words were still in his ears. And as the party continued without him, Naruto found himself staring at the doorway with the growing sense that this day was only getting worse. 3 days later, the engagement ceremony was even worse than Naruto had imagined. That was saying something, because he had been imagining it as a nightmare from the moment Minato told him the Emperor's decree was real. The banquet hall was enormous, bright beneath crystal chandeliers and trimmed in polished gold. Everything was so grand, so carefully arranged, that it felt less like a celebration and more like a cage someone had decorated. Britannian nobles filled the room in layered silk, formal military uniforms, and jewels heavy enough to feed an entire district for a year. At the far end of the hall, beneath the imperial crest, a raised dais had been prepared with 2 elegant seats placed side by side. One for Euphemia. One for Naruto. He hated it. He hated the lights. He hated the music. He hated the endless polite smiles. He hated the way every noble in the room looked at him like he was no longer a person, but a political arrangement dressed in expensive formalwear. And after everything that had happened with Colin 3 days ago, every smile he forced onto his face felt even heavier. Naruto sat rigidly in the ceremonial attire that had been chosen for him, his expression controlled only because years of dealing with politicians, investors, and corporate vultures had taught him how to keep a polite face while wanting to tear a room apart. To anyone watching, he probably looked calm. He wasn't. His thoughts kept circling back to Colin. The argument. The hurt in her eyes. The way she had looked at him like he had already accepted this. Like the fact that he could stand here, smile when expected, and play the part meant that some part of him had stopped fighting. That hurt more than he wanted to admit. Because Naruto knew what this looked like. He was sitting beside Princess Euphemia Lee Britannia beneath the imperial crest, surrounded by nobles congratulating him on an engagement he had never asked for. He was dressed like some proper imperial fiancé, nodding when spoken to, smiling when required, allowing everyone in the room to pretend this was something romantic instead of something forced into place by decree. From a distance, maybe it did look like he was fine with it. The thought made his stomach twist. Beside him, Euphemia sat in a beautiful ceremonial dress, her posture perfect and her expression gentle. But there was a strain beneath that gentleness, one most people in the room would never notice. Naruto noticed. So did Suzaku. He stood a respectful distance at Euphemia's side in full knightly regalia, hands clasped behind his back, face calm and dutiful. But every now and then, his gaze shifted toward Naruto with quiet sympathy. The nobles would not stop coming. They approached one after another, smiling too widely and bowing just low enough to show respect without ever forgetting their own rank. Princess Euphemia, you look radiant. Sir Naruto, an honor. Such an auspicious union. The Emperor's wisdom is truly remarkable. One could hardly imagine a more suitable pairing. Naruto smiled tightly at each one. Sure. Thanks. That's one word for it. Thankfully, most of them seemed to mistake his clipped replies for stoic reserve instead of barely controlled irritation. One particularly oily lord leaned closer, his smile slick with calculation. I must say, Sir Naruto, the Namikaze Corporation is most fortunate. To be tied so directly to the imperial family now. Naruto turned his head and gave the man a flat look. Funny, he said. I thought people were supposed to congratulate the couple, not the stock portfolio. The noble blinked. For one brief second, Euphemia's strained expression almost broke into a real smile. The man recovered with a stiff laugh. Ah. Yes. Quite. Suzaku stared very carefully ahead, though the corner of his mouth twitched. Across the hall, Minato, Kushina, and Mito stood near one of the banquet tables reserved for honored guests. They had come because politics demanded it, but more than that, because Naruto needed them there. Kushina had already gone through 3 different moods in the last 20 minutes. Furious mother. Dignified representative. And woman, one rude comment away from climbing over a table and strangling a duke. At the moment, she was clinging to the second one with visible effort. I hate this, she muttered. Minato kept his hands folded calmly in front of him. I know. No, I don't think you do, Kushina said under her breath. Because if you did, you'd be helping me decide which chandelier I'm going to rip down if one more person calls this romantic. Mito folded her arms, eyes fixed on Naruto. He looks like he wants to stab someone with a salad fork. That's my boy, Kushina said immediately, with entirely too much pride. Minato sighed softly, though a faint smile tugged at his mouth. He's holding up. Mito's expression tightened. That's not the same as being okay. The words drained some of the fire from Kushina's face. Because Mito was right. Naruto was enduring this, but he was not okay. On the dais, Euphemia leaned slightly toward him when the latest noble finally moved away. I'm sorry, she said quietly. Naruto kept his gaze forward. For which part? Euphemia winced faintly. All of it. That softened him, if only a little. He glanced at her, saw the guilt in her violet eyes, and forced himself to breathe. I know, he said. It's not your fault. Her fingers tightened around the stem of her glass. That does not make it any easier. No, Naruto admitted quietly. It really doesn't. A servant approached with 2 fresh glasses, and another wave of dignitaries began drifting toward them. Naruto exhaled through his nose. Suzaku noticed. From where he stood, Naruto looked less like a fiancé being honored and more like a man being politely strangled by etiquette. Suzaku could only imagine how trapped he felt. The decree. Euphemia. The emperor. The nobles. And Colin. Suzaku did not know everything that had happened between Naruto and Colin, but he knew enough to recognize guilt when he saw it. He had seen the way Naruto's expression shifted whenever Colin's name came up. He had seen the distance in his eyes tonight. This was not just embarrassment. This was something deeper. One older noblewoman approached with a smile that never reached her eyes. Princess Euphemia, she said warmly, you look radiant. Euphemia smiled because she had to. Thank you. The woman's gaze slid to Naruto, appraising him like an ornament being inspected for flaws. An Sr. Naruto. Quite a remarkable rise. Naruto stared at her. Been a weird week, he said. The noblewoman laughed as though he had made an elegant joke. Naruto's smile did not reach his eyes. His hands curled slowly against his knees. Part of him wanted to be angry at Colin for what she had said 3 days ago. Maybe he was. But another part of him understood why she had said it. She had been hurt. Scared. Angry at a situation neither of them knew how to fix. She had looked at him and seen the ceremony, the title, the smiles, the royal expectations closing around him. And maybe what bothered Naruto most was that he did not know how to prove her wrong. He did not know how to show her that surviving this room did not mean surrendering to it. He did not know how to show anyone. From across the hall, Mito caught Suzaku's eye. She tilted her head slightly toward Naruto, her expression grim. She did not need to say anything. He looks miserable. Suzaku gave the smallest nod in return. Yes, he does. And there was nothing Suzaku could do from where he stood except remain upright, remain composed, and hope the ceremony ended before Naruto's patience finally snapped. At last, after far too many speeches about imperial unity, noble cooperation, and the bright future of Britannia's relationship with the Namikaze household, the formal acknowledgement of the engagement was made. The room erupted in applause. Naruto kept his face carefully neutral. Euphemia lowered her gaze slightly, smiling because the room expected her to, though her grip on her glass tightened. The sound washed over Naruto like static. He wanted to stand up. He wanted to tear off the formal coat. He wanted to tell every noble in the hall exactly what he thought of their congratulations, their politics, and their precious imperial decree. Instead, he sat there. Because one wrong move would not only hurt him. It would hurt his family. It would hurt Euphemia. Then, from the floor below, Kushina lifted her glass just enough for him to see. Mito followed. Then Minato. It was not dramatic. It was not loud. No one else in the room would understand it. But Naruto did. We're here. Hold on. Some of the tension in his shoulders loosened. For the first time that night, Naruto let himself breathe without feeling like the room was closing around his throat. Then another noble approached, already smiling. Naruto's expression flattened again. Suzaku looked at him, then away, and thought with complete sincerity, "Man, I really feel sorry for him right now." Later, before the engagement banquet had fully wound down, Naruto somehow found himself dragged into a smaller meeting. Smaller, unfortunately, did not mean better. He stood near a long table in one of the villa's side conference rooms, arms folded and expression flat, while a military officer arranged maps, schedules, and documents with the stiff importance Naruto had come to associate with things he absolutely wanted no part of. Euphemia stood beside him, hands clasped neatly in front of her. She already looked faintly apologetic. That was never a good sign. At the head of the table, Cornelia waited with her usual flawless composure. The officer tapped a section of the map. As ordered, preparations for the inspection visit to Shikin Island have been finalized. Security will be handled by the Royal Guard, with additional support from local forces already stationed there. Departure is scheduled for tomorrow morning. Naruto stared at the map. Then he slowly looked at Cornelia. Why? He asked, am I being briefed on this? Cornelia did not so much as blink. Because you will be attending. Naruto blinked once. The hell I am. Euphemia winced. Cornelia did not. Yes. You are. Naruto unfolded his arms just enough to gesture at himself. Why do I have to go to Shikin Island? The officer beside the map went very still, clearly deciding that silence was the safest possible strategy. Cornelia exhaled through her nose. It was not quite a sigh, but it was close enough. I understand your frustration, she said, voice controlled, though not entirely without sympathy. But since you are now expected to marry into the royal family, certain duties will fall to you. When Euphemia is requested to attend official functions, your presence may be required as well. Naruto stared at her. Then at Euphemia. Then back at Cornelia. You're serious? Completely. His expression twisted with disbelief. So because of one decree, I suddenly have to start showing up at military inspections on random islands. State visits, Cornelia corrected. That is not better. Euphemia brought a hand lightly to her mouth, trying and failing not to smile. Naruto noticed immediately and pointed at her. Don't laugh. You're supposed to be on my side. I am on your side, Euphemia said quickly, though the smile still lingered. I just understand why she is saying it. Naruto groaned and dragged a hand down his face. This is insane. His palm lingered over his eyes a second longer than it should have. For a moment, the room shifted. The gold trim along the walls blurred. The ink lines on the map smeared together. Cornelia's outline doubled faintly at the edges before snapping back into place. Naruto went still. It was only a second. Not as bad as before. Not the sharp, disorienting darkness that had scared him the last time. But it was enough to make his stomach tighten. Enough to remind him that something was wrong, even if he refused to think about it here. Not in front of Cornelia. Not in front of Euphemia. Not in front of some officer already pretending not to hear half the things Naruto said. He lowered his hand and forced his expression back into irritation before anyone could ask. But Euphemia had seen it. Her violet eyes flicked toward him, soft with worry. She noticed the tiny pause, the way his shoulders locked, the way his eyes took just a moment too long to focus again. She did not say anything. Not with Cornelia standing there. Not with the officer present. Not when Naruto was already struggling to keep himself together beneath all the pressure of the night. But she noticed. Naruto kept his eyes on the map and pretended nothing had happened. His thoughts drifted back to Colin before he could stop them. Now here he was. Another room. Another obligation. Another step deeper into a life he had never chosen. Naruto's fingers curled slightly against his sleeve. He hated this. He hated all of it. But hating it did not seem to change anything. Cornelia's eyes narrowed slightly, likely mistaking his silence for another round of stubbornness. Insane or not, she said, it is now part of your position. Naruto muttered something under his breath that was definitely not respectful. Euphemia leaned slightly closer. I'm sorry, she said quietly. Naruto let out a slow breath and looked at her. The guilt in her expression took some of the edge off his anger. Not all of it, but enough. I know, he said. Then he turned back to the map with open distrust. And what exactly am I supposed to do there? Cornelia answered without hesitation. Observe, listen, learn, be seen. Naruto frowned. That sounds suspiciously like politician work. It is. I hate politician work. Yes, Cornelia said dryly. That has not escaped my notice. Euphemia gave a soft laugh before she could stop herself. Naruto shot her a look. Her smile turned sheepish. Sorry. No, you're not. No, she admitted gently. Not entirely. Despite himself, Naruto almost smiled. Then Colin's face rose in his mind again, and whatever warmth had started to loosen the knot in his chest faded. Cornelia turned back toward the officer. Continue. The man looked deeply relieved to have something concrete to do again. He tapped the map with a pointer. The visit will begin with an inspection of the island's defensive facilities, followed by a formal reception with local command. From there, Her Highness and the attending representatives will review the garrison's readiness reports before returning. Naruto's head dipped slightly. Not from boredom this time. His vision did not blur again, but he could still feel the echo of it behind his eyes, like pressure building where it should not be. He hated the weakness of it. Hated that even his own body seemed determined to betray him at the worst possible moments. Euphemia's hand brushed his sleeve. A small touch. Careful enough that no one else would think anything of it. Naruto glanced at her. I'll stay with you, she whispered. For a moment, he did not answer. He wanted to be angry. He wanted to snap that he did not need a babysitter. He wanted to say he could handle one stupid island visit and a room full of officers. But Euphemia was not mocking him. She was not pitying him either. She was trying to help. So Naruto looked away first. Still hate this, he muttered. Cornelia heard him anyway. That, she said, is unfortunate. Naruto folded his arms again and resigned himself to listening, though the look on his face made it very clear he was doing so under protest. Beside him, Euphemia kept her hands clasped in front of her and her expression composed. But every now and then, her eyes flicked toward him. Toward his face. Toward his eyes. She said nothing. Naruto was grateful for that. He had enough weighing on him tonight. And no matter how hard he tried to focus on the map in front of him, his thoughts kept drifting back to Colin. By the time the day finally ended, Naruto felt like he had lived through 3 separate lifetimes in only a few hours. The engagement banquet had been exhausting enough. Then came the briefing for the trip to Shikin Island, which had only driven the point deeper. Whether he liked it or not, his life was being forced into shapes he had never agreed to. By the time he was shown to the room prepared for the night, he was too tired to even be properly angry anymore. The room was elegant in the way royal accommodations always seem to be. Too large. Too polished. Too carefully arranged to feel natural. The bed was wide enough for 3 people, the curtains were drawn against the night, and the low lamplight softened everything into something deceptively calm. Naruto stood near the foot of the bed and stared at it like it had personally insulted him. This is ridiculous, he muttered. A few feet away, Euphemia stood in her nightclothes, hands clasped loosely in front of her. At his words, her gaze lowered. I'm sorry. Naruto exhaled and rubbed the back of his neck, guilt cutting through his irritation almost immediately. He looked over at her and shook his head. No. Don't apologize. His voice softened. I'm not mad at you, Yuffie. Not even a little. Some of the tension eased from her face. Not all of it. Because the truth was, neither of them had chosen this. Some advisor somewhere, probably with the Emperor's approval and the enthusiastic support of half the villa staff, had decided that since they were now formally engaged, it would be beneficial for them to begin getting used to shared spaces. Naruto had nearly argued himself hoarse when it had been explained. Euphemia had looked so embarrassed at the time that he had stopped himself before he said anything too sharp in front of people who would only twist the reaction into something useful. Now, standing in the quiet of the room, the absurdity settled over them in a different way. Naruto let out a tired laugh with no humor in it. Every time I think this whole mess can't get any weirder, Britannia finds a way. That drew the faintest smile from her. Euphemia stepped a little closer. I really am sorry, she said again, softer this time. Not because I think you blame me. I know you don't. But because I know how unfair all of this has been to you. Naruto looked at her for a long moment. Then he stepped closer too, until only a small distance remained between them. It's been unfair to you too, he said. Her violet eyes lifted to his. Naruto's expression gentled. You didn't ask for this any more than I did. Something vulnerable flickered across her face. Then she smiled, small, warm, and sad all at once. No, she admitted. I suppose I didn't. The room fell quiet after that. Not awkward, exactly. Just delicate. Naruto sat down on the edge of the bed, elbows resting on his knees as he stared at the carpet. After a moment, Euphemia joined him. She sat with far more grace than he managed, hands folded in her lap, close enough that their shoulders nearly brushed. Neither of them moved away. Naruto glanced at her. You okay? Euphemia hesitated. I think so. You don't sound sure. She let out a soft breath. I'm trying to be. His face softened. Slowly, carefully, he reached over and took one of her hands in his. Euphemia looked down at their joined hands, and for a moment her breath caught. Naruto gave her fingers a gentle squeeze. We'll figure it out. Her smile returned, though it trembled at the edges. They sat like that for a while, hand in hand, the strangeness of the night settling into something quieter. The pressure did not vanish. The decree did not become less real. But for a few minutes, at least, it felt less like they were being crushed beneath it alone. Then Euphemia tilted her head slightly, studying his face. Naruto noticed. What? She hesitated before asking, why do your eyes seem strained? The question hit harder than it should have. Naruto stilled for the briefest moment. He knew exactly why they felt strained. He knew why his vision had started to blur, why the ache behind his eyes came and went in sharp little waves. Kurama was doing what he could, slowly repairing the damage, but that did not change the truth. He was going blind. Slowly, maybe. But if he kept using the Mangekyo Sharingan the way he had been, slowly would not stay slow for very long. He could not tell her that. So he looked away and forced a small, tired smile. They're fine, he lied. Just overworked. Euphemia's expression did not fully ease. She looked like she wanted to ask more. But she didn't. Instead, she gave his hand another small squeeze. You've had a very long day. Naruto let out a breath through his nose. Yeah, that's one way to put it. She let the subject drop, though the concern never fully left her face. After another quiet moment, Euphemia looked down at their joined hands, then back up at him. Naruto, how do you feel about me? The question settled between them in the dim room. Naruto blinked. Euphemia held his gaze now, sincerity plain in her violet eyes. I know this isn't how either of us imagined something like this happening, she said softly. And I know what I said publicly changed things in ways I never meant for them to. Her fingers tightened slightly around his. But I wanted to ask you plainly. Not as a princess. Not because of politics. Just as me. Naruto was silent for a long moment. Long enough for worry to flicker across her face. Then he turned toward her more fully. I care about you, he said. The words were simple. But he meant them. Euphemia's expression softened, and she stayed quiet, letting him continue. I think you're one of the kindest people I've ever met, Naruto said. Not because you're naive. Not because you're soft. But because even with all the pressure around you, you still choose to care. He gave the faintest smile. That's harder than people think. A blush touched her cheeks. Naruto looked down at their hands, then back at her. You make me feel calm. Or, calmer than I probably should be, considering everything. That drew a small, breathless laugh from her. And, he added, a little more awkwardly now, I like being around you. A lot. Her eyes widened just a fraction. Naruto exhaled through his nose. I'm still angry about all of this. The decree. The pressure. Everyone deciding things for us like we don't get a say. His jaw tightened briefly. But none of that anger is because of you. Euphemia looked at him in silence, taking in every word. Then, very softly, she asked, could you ever love me? Naruto did not answer right away. Not because he wanted to hurt her. Because he refused to lie. I don't know, he said honestly. Not yet. The words should have hurt. Maybe they did. But there was so much gentleness in the way he said them that Euphemia only squeezed his hand in return. That's fair, she whispered. Naruto searched her face. You're okay with that? She gave him a small, fragile smile. I asked for honesty. That made him smile too, and this time there was something genuinely tender in it. Then honestly, Naruto said, lifting her hands slightly between them, I think you deserve the truth from me. Always. Her heart ached a little at that. Because it was such a Naruto thing to say. Because she believed him. And because some quiet part of her still sensed that there was something he was holding back. Still, she did not push. Without thinking too hard about it, Euphemia leaned her head gently against his shoulder. Naruto went still for only a second before relaxing beside her. The quiet that followed felt warmer now. Less like two people trapped by duty, and more like two hearts trying very carefully not to hurt each other in the middle of something neither of them had chosen. After a while, Naruto looked down at her and said, with the faintest hint of a smile, so, how exactly are we supposed to handle the whole sleeping arrangement thing? That made her laugh softly against his shoulder. I don't know. Great plan. Euphemia tipped her face up just enough to look at him. Would it be alright if we just slept beside each other? Nothing more. Just enough to satisfy everyone else. Naruto looked at her for a second, then nodded. Yeah, he said. That's alright. Her smile turned warmer. Later, when the lamps were dimmed and the room had gone nearly dark, they lay side by side beneath the covers, careful at first, both very aware of the other. For a while, neither of them moved much. Then, little by little, the tension eased. At some point, Euphemia shifted closer in her sleep, one hand coming to rest lightly against his arm. Naruto turned his head and looked at her in the darkness. Everything about this was wrong. The decree. The villa. The expectations. The future being built around them without either of them being asked. And yet there was something undeniably soft about this quiet. He did not know what this would become. He did not know what he and Euphemia were supposed to be. But as he listened to her breathing steady beside him, Naruto found that, for the first time all day, the anger in him had finally gone still. The night before everything became even more complicated, Suzaku kept his promise. Or, more accurately, the promise Mito had very boldly demanded from him over the phone. A proper date. Not a rushed conversation in some school hallway. Not a few stolen words squeezed between obligations. Not one of Millie's chaotic events pushing them into the same room and calling it fate. A real date. And somehow, despite everything else weighing on him, the military, Euphemia, the Lancelot, the constant pressure of trying to become someone strong enough to help build a better world, Suzaku found himself more nervous about this than almost anything else. He stood outside the Namikaze household in clothes that were simple but neat, his hands tucked into his coat pockets mostly to stop himself from fidgeting. Then the front door opened. Mito stepped out. For a second, every word he had prepared vanished. She noticed immediately. Mito tilted her head, one brow lifting slightly. Well. Suzaku blinked. You look. Her mouth curved into the faintest smirk. That bad? No, Suzaku said quickly. Too quickly. No, you look amazing. That caught her off guard just enough for him to see it before she recovered. Good answer, she said, stepping down to join him. Suzaku let out a quiet breath, half relieved and half amazed that he had survived the first 30 seconds. Mito glanced at him as they started walking. You're nervous. A little, Suzaku admitted. You've fought soldiers and terrorists. Yes. You've piloted the Lancelot into live combat. Yes. And this is what makes you nervous. Suzaku looked at her. Because it was Mito, because she had asked him directly, and because he had never been very good at lying to her, he answered honestly. Yes. That made her go quiet for a moment. Then, softly, she said, good. Suzaku looked at her in confusion. Good. It means it matters. He did not have an answer for that. Or maybe he did, and it was written too plainly on his face, because Mito looked away before he could say anything. Their first stop was a small street market that stayed open late, lit by strings of warm lights hanging between stalls. The air smelled of grilled food, sugar, oil, and rain-washed pavement. Vendors called out to passing customers, selling handmade crafts, little trinkets, sweets, and snacks wrapped in paper trays. It was crowded enough to feel alive, but not so packed that they had to shout to hear each other. Mito looked around with quiet interest, her eyes moving from stall to stall. Suzaku found the sight more endearing than he was prepared for. You brought me here on purpose, she said. I thought you'd like it. And if I didn't? Suzaku smiled. Then I would pretend I had a backup plan. Mito narrowed her eyes. You didn't have one, did you? No. She snorted softly. Honest, at least. They wandered slowly, stopping whenever something caught Mito's attention. She paused at a stall selling small carved ornaments and picked up a fox figurine with a smug little face and a raised tail. She turned it in her hand, studying it with complete seriousness. This looks like Naruto when he's trying to act innocent after doing something stupid. Suzaku laughed under his breath. That's cruel. It's accurate. It is a little accurate, he admitted. Mito looked far too pleased with that. So Suzaku bought it. She noticed immediately. Of course she did. You didn't have to do that. I know. You're wasting money. I don't think so. Mito studied him for a moment, as if trying to decide whether to argue. Then she looked away, holding the small fox carefully in her hand. Thank you, she said, quieter this time. Suzaku smiled. You're welcome. They stopped for food next. Takoyaki first, because Mito insisted with the absolute confidence of someone who had already decided the date would fail without it. Then grilled skewers, because Suzaku pointed out that she could hardly judge his appetite if she kept stealing from his portion. I took one, Mito said. You took 4. That sounds like your opinion. I counted. Mito took another bite from his skewer just to spite him. Suzaku stared at her. She stared back. Then they both started laughing. After that, they shared a paper tray of sweet buns dusted with sugar. Mito ate more neatly than Naruto ever would have, but a little sugar still caught at the corner of her mouth. Without thinking, Suzaku reached out and brushed it away. The second his fingers touched her skin, both of them went still. Mito's eyes lifted to his. Suzaku's hand hovered there for half a second too long before he pulled it back, suddenly aware of how close they were standing. Sorry, he murmured. Mito swallowed once. It's fine. Neither of them moved away. For a moment, the noise of the market seemed to dim around them. Then a vendor loudly called out a discount on fried dumplings nearby, and the spell broke just enough for Mito to clear her throat and look away. Suzaku pretended not to notice the color in her cheeks. She pretended not to notice the color in his. Later, they found themselves along the riverwalk, where the city lights stretched in long, wavering ribbons across the dark water. It was quieter there. The market noise faded behind them, replaced by the gentle lap of the river against the embankment and the distant hum of traffic. The night air had cooled, and Mito folded her arms loosely against the chill. Suzaku noticed. Without making a big show of it, he slipped off his outer coat and held it out to her. Mito looked at the coat. Then at him. You'll be cold. I'll survive. She gave him a skeptical look, but after a moment, she accepted it. She slipped it on carefully, like she was trying not to let the gesture mean too much. It did anyway. They walked side by side after that, shoulders nearly brushing. Suzaku. Yes. Why did you say yes? He glanced at her. To the date. Yes. Suzaku smiled faintly. Because you asked. Mito gave him a flat look. That is not a real answer. It is. No, it's the safe answer. Suzaku looked ahead again, his hands tucked into his pockets. His expression softened. Because when you asked, he said quietly, I was happier than I thought I had any right to be. Mito went silent. He kept going before his nerves could stop him. And because I've been thinking about you. A lot. Mito stared at him. After a moment, she asked, how much is a lot? Suzaku let out a soft, embarrassed laugh. Enough that Lloyd noticed I was distracted. Her brows lifted. That's bad. It was humiliating. That made her laugh. Then her smile softened, and she looked away toward the river. I've been thinking about you too. Suzaku turned to look at her fully. Mito kept her eyes on the water, but he could see the faint flush rising in her cheeks. I didn't mean to, she muttered. It just sort of happened. Suzaku's voice softened. Yeah, I know what that's like. They slowed to a stop by the railing. Below them, the river reflected silver and gold. For once, the city felt far away. Mito turned toward him, one hand lightly gripping the borrowed coat around her shoulders. You know, she said, I almost didn't ask. Suzaku blinked. Why not? Because I wasn't sure you'd say yes. I would have. You say that now. I would have, he repeated, firmer this time. Mito searched his face, looking for any sign that he was only saying what she wanted to hear. Apparently, she found none. Okay, she said quietly. A brief silence settled between them. Then Suzaku asked, were you really that worried? Mito let out a small breath through her nose. You have no idea. There was something so honest in the admission that it made his chest ache. He stepped a little closer. Not enough to crowd her. Not enough to trap her. Just close enough that she could step back if she wanted to. She didn't. Mito, he said softly. Her eyes lifted to his. I'm glad you asked. The words were simple, but the way he said them made her breath catch. Mito had always known Suzaku was kind, patient, steady in a way that sometimes made him seem older than he was. But there was something deeply unfair about having all that warmth focused entirely on her. So she did the only thing that made sense. She reached up, caught him lightly by the collar, and kissed him. Suzaku froze in pure surprise. Then, slowly, carefully, he kissed her back. It was not rushed. Not desperate. Just warm and real and enough to make both of them forget, for a few precious seconds, that the rest of the world existed at all. When they parted, Mito kept one hand lightly against his chest. Suzaku looked completely dazed. You should ask for things more often, he murmured. Mito laughed softly, still a little breathless. Careful. I might. I think I'd survive. That's twice tonight you've said that. And both times I meant it. She shook her head at him, smiling in a way he wished he could memorize forever. Their last stop was a small hill overlooking a quieter part of the settlement. It was not beautiful in the way the countryside could be. The city glow washed out most of the sky, and the stars that remained were faint, scattered things. But the hill was high enough and far enough from the brighter streets that a few of them could still be seen. Mito sat first, folding her legs beneath her. Suzaku settled beside her. For a while, neither of them said anything. That silence felt easy too. After some time, Mito leaned sideways until her shoulder rested against his. Suzaku glanced down at her but did not speak. He only shifted slightly so she could rest more comfortably. You know, Mito said after a while, this was a good first proper date. Suzaku smiled. First. She tilted her face up toward him, her smile teasing at the edges. You thought you were only getting one. Suzaku laughed quietly, the sound filled with relief, wonder, and something even softer. No, he said. I was hoping I wouldn't. Mito nodded once, satisfied with that answer. Then she slipped her hand into his. Suzaku looked down at their joined hands, then back at the faint stars above them. Morning came softly. For a few quiet seconds, the room was filled with pale gold as sunlight slipped through the heavy curtains and stretched across the bed in thin, warm lines. Beyond the windows, the villa had already begun to wake. Distant voices in the halls, the muted footsteps of servants, the faint rustle of a world returning to motion. Inside the room, everything was still. Naruto woke first. At first, he only blinked up at the unfamiliar ceiling, caught in that strange space between sleep and awareness where nothing made sense yet. Then the memories came back all at once. The decree. The banquet. The briefing. The complete absurdity of being expected to share a room with Euphemia because some collection of aristocrats and advisors had decided it was proper preparation for their engagement. Naruto exhaled slowly. Then he realized Euphemia was still tucked against his side. Sometime during the night, she had shifted closer to him, one hand resting lightly near his chest, her breathing soft and steady. In sleep, all the royal grace and careful composure had slipped away from her. She did not look like a princess or a political symbol. She just looked young, peaceful, trusting. Naruto looked down at her for a long moment. Despite everything, his expression softened. He moved carefully, trying not to wake her, but even that small shift was enough. Euphemia's lashes fluttered, and a second later she stirred, blinking sleepily up at him with violet eyes still hazy from sleep. For a moment, neither of them said anything. Then her cheeks turned pink. Oh, she murmured. Naruto quickly looked away, one hand moving to the back of his neck. Morning. Good morning, Euphemia replied, her voice still quiet and soft from sleep. A small silence settled between them. Awkward, yes. But not uncomfortable. Euphemia slowly pushed herself up on one elbow, smoothing her hair back with one hand. Did you sleep at all? Naruto gave a quiet huff. Eventually. That brought a small smile to her face. Me too. He glanced back at her, and for a few seconds they simply looked at each other in the morning light. Not as a forced engagement. Not as pieces being moved across some imperial board. Just two tired people trying to be gentle with each other in the middle of a situation neither of them had chosen. Euphemia lowered her gaze first. Thank you, she said softly. Naruto frowned a little. For what? For being gentle with me through all of this. The words were simple, but they hit harder than she probably meant them to. Naruto's expression softened again. You don't have to thank me for that. Maybe not, she said, looking back up at him. But I still want to. Naruto let out a slow breath and sat up, the sheets shifting around his waist as he rubbed a hand over his face. Well, he muttered, we survived the night. That drew a quiet laugh from her. Yes, Euphemia said. We did. He looked at her from the corner of his eye. Think that'll satisfy whoever came up with this stupid idea. Euphemia lifted a hand to cover her smile. Probably. Great. Then maybe they'll leave us alone for 5 minutes. She tilted her head slightly. You really don't like royal customs, do you? Naruto gave her a flat look. Yuffie, I barely like regular customs. This time, she laughed properly. The sound was warm and bright enough that Naruto found himself smiling despite everything. But the ease between them did not last long. A knock came at the door. Both of them froze. Then a servant's voice called from the other side, perfectly polite and painfully well-timed. Your Highnesses, breakfast will be prepared shortly. Naruto closed his eyes. Euphemia bit her lip, clearly trying not to laugh again. See. Naruto muttered. 5 minutes. Couldn't even get 5 minutes. Euphemia looked at him, the smile still lingering on her face, softer now. No, she said gently. But I'm glad morning came anyway. Naruto looked back at her. He still did not know what the future between them was supposed to be. He still did not know how to untangle the decree, the expectations, or the feelings he had not asked to carry. But in that quiet moment, with sunlight across the bed and Euphemia smiling beside him, Naruto found that he was glad too. The Black Knight's submarine moved silently beneath the waters off Shikin Island, its frame groaning softly beneath the pressure of the sea. Inside the command room, the air felt heavier than usual. No one liked this mission. No one liked the reason for it, either. And thanks to Lloyd Asplin's remarkable talent for announcing catastrophic personal developments to the entire world, Everyone now knew exactly how tangled the situation had become. Tamaki was the first one to say what most of them were thinking. I still can't believe this, he muttered, arms folded tightly across his chest. The whole damn internet knows now. Kururugi's the princess's knight, and the damn Namikaze heir is apparently engaged to her. He shook his head with a grimace. What a mess. Colin stood near one of the monitors, arms crossed, her expression carefully neutral. Inside, she was anything but. It was bad enough that Naruto had been dragged into an engagement by royal decree. Bad enough that Euphemia clearly cared about him. Bad enough that the whole situation had turned into one more chain wrapped around his life. But now, on top of everything else, Colin was standing inside a Black Knight's submarine preparing for an operation against Suzaku Kururugi. Suzaku, who was no longer simply Britannia's White Knight. Suzaku, who was now Princess Euphemia's knight. Euphemia, who was Naruto's fiancé. Colin shut her eyes for half a second. This is ridiculous, she muttered under her breath. Todo, standing nearby with his usual composed posture, glanced toward her. Something to add. Colin opened her eyes again and let out a slow breath. Just that I really hate how complicated this has gotten. Tamaki snorted. Complicated. That's one way to put it. Colin shot him a look. I'm being serious. So am I, Tamaki muttered. At the head of the room, Zero stood with his hands clasped behind his back while the officers settled into position around him. Our objective remains unchanged, Zero said. We are here to capture Suzaku Kururugi. The word capture drew visible relief from Colin and Todo. At least that meant they were not moving straight toward the option Diethard had been pushing. Todo inclined his head slightly. That is the preferable outcome. Colin nodded once. Yeah. Zero's masked gaze swept over the room. Once Suzaku is in our custody, I will deal with him personally. No one challenged him. Not out loud. Elsewhere in the submarine, Rakshata lounged near the equipment overseeing the radar defense system, half supervising and half looking like she might fall asleep from boredom. Diethard stood a short distance away, watching the updates with keen interest as data moved across the screens. You really do have marvelous toys, he said. Rakshata did not look up. And you really do talk too much. Diethard smiled faintly. A moment later, Zero entered. The shift in the room was immediate. Diethard noticed it at once and turned. Zero. Zero did not waste time. You told Colin to kill Suzaku. It was not phrased as a question. Diethard studied him for a moment, then gave the smallest shrug. Yes. Rakshata's eyes flicked up with mild interest. Zero's tone cooled. Why? Diethard slipped his hands into his pockets. Because if Suzaku Kururugi had died discreetly in the confusion, several problems would have been solved at once. Zero remained still. Diethard continued calmly, as though he were discussing nothing more troubling than production schedules. The media could have been guided away from the Black Knights. Britannia would have been thrown into disorder. And the symbol they have just created would have disappeared before it could properly take root. Zero stared at him. Diethard met that hidden gaze without flinching. You do not change the world without getting your hands dirty. Zero took one slow step closer. That is not your decision to make. For a moment, silence pressed in around them. Then Zero spoke again, quieter this time. What are you really after? Diethard's faint smile returned. I beg your pardon. You have nothing to gain from Japanese liberation, Zero said. You are Britannian. You are ambitious. Opportunistic. You joined us for a reason, and it is not justice. His voice sharpened slightly. So tell me what you want. For a moment, Diethard said nothing. Then, to Rakshata's visible amusement, he actually answered honestly. I want history. Zero did not respond. Diethard's eyes brightened in the way they always did when he spoke about the thing that truly mattered to him. I want to witness it. Record it. Preserve it. He spread one hand lightly. A documentary, if you prefer. The Rise of Zero. The man who overturned the world before anyone understood what was happening. His smile widened by a fraction. I want to be there when it happens. Rakshata hummed. That sounds obsessive. It is honest, Diethard replied. Zero tilted his head slightly. You would fabricate it. Diethard did not even bother to deny it. Of course. All history is edited by someone. The only real question is whether that person has vision. That might have amused someone else. Zero gave him nothing. If you intend to continue following me for your history, Zero said, then understand this clearly. You do not interfere in military decisions again. Diethard's smile thinned. Understood. Zero remained there for one more second, making it perfectly clear that this was not a negotiation. Then he turned and left. Rakshata watched him go before glancing sidelong at Diethard. Well, she drawled, that could have gone worse. Diethard let out a soft breath. It still might. Back in the command room, Colin stood in front of the tactical display, but her mind was only half on Shikin Island. The other half kept circling back to Naruto. To the engagement announcement. To Euphemia. To Suzaku. To the ugly, impossible not all of them had been shoved into. Naruto had been forced into an engagement he did not want. Euphemia had been pulled into it too. Suzaku had become her knight. And now Colin had to stand here, preparing to chase after her boyfriend's fiancé's knight in the middle of a covert military operation. The whole thing was so absurd she almost wanted to laugh. Instead, she muttered, I seriously hate this. Toto looked over again. The operation. Colin gave a small, humorless smile. The entire situation. Toto studied her for a moment, then simply nodded. Understandable. Colin looked back at the tactical screen, but the glowing lines and markers blurred into something meaningless after a while. Her thoughts drifted somewhere else. Back to Naruto. Back to the argument. She could still see his face when she had snapped at him. The way he had gone quiet. The way he had looked at her like he was trying to understand something, trying to read her expression piece by piece before she shut him out completely. At the time, it had made her angrier. The way he stared. The way he looked hurt. The way he stood there, trapped in a situation neither of them knew how to fix, and somehow still made her feel like she was the one being unreasonable. But now, with the cold hum of the submarine around her and the mission pressing closer by the minute, Colin found herself thinking about it differently. Why had he been studying her face like that? Had he been trying to figure out if she hated him? Had he been trying to see whether she still cared? Or had he just wanted one moment with her where they could stop pretending everything was fine? That thought made her chest tighten. Because maybe Naruto had not come to her looking for a fight. Maybe he had just wanted her. Not as a black knight. Not as a resistance fighter. Not as someone furious at Britannia or jealous of Euphemia or terrified of losing him to a royal decree. Just her. And she had yelled at him. Colin's fingers curled slowly against her arms. She had been angry. Of course she had been angry. How could she not be? The engagement, the politics, Euphemia, the way the whole world seemed determined to drag Naruto into Britannia's hands and dress it up like some grand honor, it was infuriating. But maybe that was the problem. Maybe she had not been angry at Naruto. Not really. Maybe she had taken everything she hated about the situation and thrown it at the only person in front of her. At the person who least deserved it. Colin lowered her gaze. She was still upset. Still scared. Still jealous in ways she hated admitting even to herself. But beneath all of that, worry had begun to settle in. Because Naruto had looked tired. Not just annoyed. Not just frustrated. And the more she thought about the way he had watched her, the more it bothered her. Like there had been something else wrong. Something he was not saying. Colin swallowed and forced herself to look back at the tactical display. Now was not the time. They were approaching Shikin Island. Suzaku was the mission. Zero was counting on them. The Black Knights needed her focused. But even as the submarine continued forward beneath the dark water, Colin could not completely push Naruto from her mind. Or the quiet, guilty thought that followed. I shouldn't have yelled at him. The visit to Shikin Island began with exactly the kind of stiffness Naruto had expected. Too many uniforms. Too many officials. Too many people bowing just low enough to be respectful while still looking like they were trying to calculate what they could gain from him. Naruto stood beside Euphemia in a formal coat he already hated, hands tucked into his pockets whenever no one important was watching. Every time someone addressed him by the latest title the Emperor's decree had forced onto his life, his eye twitched a little harder. Sir Naruto, one official said, bowing as he approached. We are honored by your presence. Naruto gave him a bland look. You can just call me Naruto. The man smiled nervously. Of course, Sir Naruto. Naruto's expression went flat. Beside him, Euphemia hid a smile behind her hand. Another officer stepped forward with a clipboard tucked stiffly under one arm. Sir Naruto, if you and Princess Euphemia would please review the coastal defensive schedule. Naruto let out a long, suffering sigh. I'm begging all of you. Stop calling me that. The officer looked as though Naruto had just asked him to commit treason. Euphemia leaned a little closer to him. They're not going to stop. I know, Naruto muttered. That's what makes it worse. Suzaku stood at Euphemia's side in full knightly duty, posture straight, expression admirably composed. Only someone who knew him well would have noticed how much effort it was taking him not to smile. The inspection party continued farther inland as the officers began their reports. Coastal defenses. Patrol rotations. Communications procedures. Emergency mobilization plans. Naruto listened to just enough of it to understand that half of these people were more interested in impressing Euphemia than actually explaining anything useful. Still, beneath all the ceremony, something felt wrong. There were more soldiers than a routine visit should have required. More tension. More nervous glances between officers who thought no one noticed. Naruto noticed. Then the first explosion hit. The ground lurched beneath them. Euphemia gasped as fire and smoke erupted from one of the nearby installations. A second explosion followed almost immediately, close enough to make several officials stumble. What was that? Euphemia cried. Sirens began wailing across the island. Soldiers scrambled into formation. Orders flew in every direction. In the distance, black-marked nightmares cut down from the higher ground, descending on the island with terrifying speed. The Black Knights. One officer shouted. Across the enemy comms, Toto's voice came cold and steady. All units advance. Strike fast and keep them divided. Inside the Gurren, Colin did not hesitate. Finally, she muttered. The Red Nightmare surged forward, slamming into a pair of advancing Sutherlands and tearing through them with brutal efficiency. From a higher ridge overlooking the battlefield, Zero watched the opening clash unfold across his monitor. Britannian units were already scattering, Toto's formation was pressing hard, and the island's defensive line was beginning to buckle under the sudden assault. Then his attention shifted toward Euphemia's group. I'm going to speak with her, he said. Tamaki's head snapped toward him. That's insane. Zero ignored him. Back near the inspection route, Euphemia's escort tightened around her at once. Your Highness, we have to evacuate you. Euphemia turned sharply. Where is Suzaku? I'm here, Suzaku said, already stepping closer. One officer gestured frantically toward the transport route. Sir Suzaku, remain with the princess. Suzaku's gaze cut toward the battlefield. Every instinct in him was already pulling him toward the fight. Euphemia saw it. Go, she said. Suzaku blinked. What? Go help them, Euphemia said, her voice firm despite the chaos around them. If people are fighting, then they need you. One nearby soldier reacted instantly. Your Highness, with respect, he could turn on us. Lloyd's voice cut through the comms, somehow still cheerful despite the battlefield unfolding around them. Oh, now that's terribly inappropriate. Criticizing the judgment of royalty like that. His tone sharpened just enough to be noticed. If Her Highness says he goes, then he goes. Suzaku met Euphemia's eyes. She nodded once. Go. Suzaku bowed his head. Yes, Your Highness. Then he ran for the Lancelot. Naruto, meanwhile, had already stepped away from the cluster of officials, his eyes sweeping over the battlefield with growing irritation. Sir Naruto, you must remain with. Naruto did not even look at the man. Stay with Yuffie. Before anyone could stop him, he slipped around the side of a reinforced structure and vanished from sight. Euphemia turned just in time to catch the movement. Naruto. But he was already gone. Her worry sharpened instantly. On the battlefield below, Suzaku launched in the Lancelot and immediately tore into the fighting. Tamaki barely had time to shout before the White Nightmare smashed through his offense and sent his machine reeling backward. Then Suzaku saw him. Zero. Standing above the battlefield on a ledge, waiting. Zero raised one hand slightly, almost beckoning. You, Suzaku muttered. The Lancelot surged forward. Zero turned and fled, not in panic, but with purpose. Suzaku pursued him through broken ground, across fractured terrain, and into a wide stretch of unstable sand and rock where the larger battle began to fall away behind them. Above, Rakshata watched with a half-lidded smile. Come on, she murmured. Just a little farther. Suzaku raised Lancelot's red-edged weapon and lunged. At that exact instant, Rakshata hit the switch. A strange pulse rippled across the battlefield. Both nightmares shuddered violently. Then died. Warning screamed through Lancelot's cockpit. What? Suzaku snapped. From the command vehicle, Lloyd's eyes widened in delighted horror. A Gefjan disturber. He nearly laughed. Rakshata, you dreadful woman. The Lancelot and Zero's unit locked down in the sandpit, completely disabled. Zero climbed free and raised a handgun, leveling it toward Suzaku through the immobilized cockpit space. Don't move, he said. I'd rather talk. Suzaku glared at him, but he did not move. Zero stepped closer. Join the Black Knights. Suzaku stared at him in disbelief. Again. After all this, that's still what you want. Yes. No. Zero's gaze hardened behind the mask. Then you still haven't learned anything. Suzaku's jaw tightened. I told you before. Change has to come from within. If that were true, Zero said, taking another measured step forward, then Britannia's conquest of Japan would be justified. Suzaku's eyes widened slightly. Zero pressed on ruthlessly. If Japan's military had been completely annihilated, then the Chinese Federation and Europea united would have torn this country apart instead. They would have claimed territory, fought over resources, and preyed on the weak the way every empire does. His voice sharpened. There is no justice in occupation simply because one conqueror may be less immediate than another. Suzaku said nothing. Zero's voice dropped lower. And I know Genbu Kururugi was killed. Suzaku went still. The man responsible, Zero said, is a criminal. Suzaku's breathing turned uneven. Zero watched him closely. If you truly want redemption, there is only one path left to you. Let the Japanese fight Britannia. Suzaku looked up sharply. No. Then what? Zero demanded. More waiting. More compromise. Reform is the luxury of egotists who mistake delay for peace. We are not living in peace. Before Suzaku could answer, a transmission cut through his comms. The island's military controller sounded as though he was barely holding himself together. Sir Kururugi, orders have been issued. The island is to be bombed. Zero must be held in place. You are to hold him there at all costs. Suzaku's face changed. Zero saw it immediately. What did they order? Suzaku did not answer. Instead, he lunged. The two of them grappled in the disabled sandpit, Suzaku forcing Zero's gun away from himself and down until it was angled toward his own neck rather than letting Zero aim it anywhere else. Zero's eyes widened behind the mask. You idiot. If they fire, Suzaku said through clenched teeth, then they'll have to fire on both of us. Back with the inspection group, reports began flooding in all at once. They're preparing a bombardment. Who authorized this? That order cannot be reversed without 3 generals or the viceroy. Euphemia's face went white. No, she whispered. Your Highness. No. She turned and ran toward the shore installations. Princess Euphemia. Darlton shouted through the comms. But she was already moving. When she reached the nearest portman, she did not hesitate. Naruto, she whispered under her breath, still not knowing where he had gone. Please be all right. Then she climbed inside the machine herself. At almost the same moment, fresh reports crackled across the battlefield. Unidentified nightmare approaching. Wait. It's the Izanagi. Madara is here. Euphemia froze in the cockpit. High above the shoreline, the Izanagi cut through the smoke like a dark streak of metal and fire. Inside the cockpit, Naruto gripped the controls as warning indicators flashed red across the screens. So much for a simple inspection, he muttered. The Izanagi moved like a living thing beneath his hands, swift and precise as he drove it upward into the chaos. Missile locks screamed in his ears. Below him, Shikin Island had become a battlefield, and somewhere in the middle of that mess were Euphemia, Suzaku, Zero, and Colin, all caught in a situation that was turning suicidal by the second. Naruto's eyes narrowed. The Sharingan flared to life. Crimson flooded his vision as the Tomo spun. The incoming missiles seemed to slow, their angles sharpening, their trajectories unfolding in his sight like drawn lines across the air. His breath tightened. For one dangerous second, the Tomo began to stretch. The familiar pressure built behind his eyes. The pattern wanted to change. Mangekyo. Naruto's hand twitched on the controls. Then Kurama's voice rumbled through his memory, low and furious. You keep abusing those eyes, brat, and there won't be anything left for me to fix. Naruto froze for half a heartbeat. The ache behind his eyes sharpened, almost like a warning. His jaw clenched. Damn it. He forced the Mangekyo back. The regular Sharingan remained, burning bright but controlled. Naruto tore his attention away from the temptation of that stronger power and reached instead for the Izanagi's weapons. The MSV Kodachi blade snapped free in one hand. The MSV kunai deployed from the other. Fine, Naruto growled. We do this the hard way. The Izanagi twisted hard through the air, diving straight into the missile spread. One missile vanished beneath a clean slash from the Kodachi. Another detonated as the MSV kunai struck its side at just the right angle. A third came in too close, forcing Naruto to roll the Izanagi through the explosion and cut down through the smoke, his Sharingan tracking every fragment, every flash, every deadly arc before the machines could fully process them. Explosions lit up the sky. Fragments rained into the sea. On every channel, confusion erupted. What the hell? It's Izanagi. Madara. He's intercepting the missiles. Naruto snorted, eyes locked on the remaining barrage. Yeah, he muttered. You're welcome. The Izanagi shot through another burst of fire, its shoulder clipping a missile before Naruto pivoted and drove the Kodachi through two more in quick succession. The machine shuddered under the strain, but held. Below, the battlefield seemed to freeze for half a breath. Zero looked up from the sandpit. Suzaku did too. Even Euphemia, inside the stolen portman, stared upward in shock as the Izanagi carved through fire and smoke like a black and steel phantom. Naruto's eyes narrowed behind the cockpit display. Come on, he muttered, tracking the final dangerous vector. Just a little more. The Sharingan caught it before the onboard systems fully registered the threat. A surviving missile, angled low, slipping through the chaos toward the exact zone where the Geass disturber had trapped Lancelot and Zero. Naruto swore and threw the Izanagi into a dive. The nightmare screamed toward the ground, too fast and too close. Naruto used every fraction of predictive sight he could squeeze from the Sharingan, guiding the Izanagi through smoke, debris, and heat. The MSV Kodachi flashed. The missile split open just far enough from the ground that the explosion washed outward instead of down. The shockwave slammed into the Izanagi hard enough to rattle the cockpit. Naruto hissed as the machine bucked around him. Okay, he muttered, breathless. That one was too close. For a moment, the sky cleared enough for the battlefield to breathe again. The Izanagi hovered above them, dark and impossible against the smoke and burning light. Naruto let out one irritated sigh. Seriously, he muttered, Sharingan still spinning, next time I'm bringing the whole disguise. Then the alarms screamed again. The battlefield comms reached a fever pitch as the next wave of missiles was confirmed. They're still coming. Impact in seconds. Inside the Guren's cockpit, Colin's eyes widened as the Geass disturber continued to interfere with her systems. Damn it, she hissed, slamming her hand against the controls. Move. The Guren refused to respond properly. In the dead zone below, Suzaku still had Zero pinned, forcing him backward toward the disabled Lancelot while keeping the gun controlled between them. Get inside, Suzaku ordered. Zero's voice came cold and furious. You're actually going to die for this. Suzaku shoved him harder. If that's what it takes. Across Britannian channels, officers were already trying to shape the madness into something noble. Sir Kururugi will be remembered as a hero. Hold the target in place. Britannia will honor your sacrifice. Suzaku's jaw tightened at every word. But he did not move. Todo's voice cut sharply across the Black Knight's frequency. All units. Destroy those missiles before they reach the target zone. The Holy Swords opened fire at once, their shots streaking upward in desperate volleys. It was not enough. Colin cursed and forced the Gurren's hatch open. Colin. One pilot shouted. What are you doing? She dropped to the ground and started running straight toward Suzaku and Zero through the half-disabled zone, ignoring the danger completely. Colin, stop. Ogi shouted over the comms. No. She screamed back. I'm not letting this happen. Her boots pounded against the scorched earth as she ran, every instinct in her screaming that if she did not reach them now, she was going to lose someone she cared about. Zero turned his masked face toward Suzaku again. Why? He demanded. Why do you keep choosing orders over your own heart? Suzaku's expression flickered. Because if people don't follow the rules, then everything falls apart. Zero laughed once, harsh and disbelieving. And you call this order? Before Suzaku could answer, a vast shadow passed over the battlefield. Everyone looked up. A massive floating warship descended through the smoke and fire, its sheer size blotting out part of the sky. The Avalon, Euphemia whispered. She had abandoned the stolen portman and was running forward on foot now, horrified by what she was seeing and unable to stop herself from moving toward it. Schneisel. Inside the Avalon, the order came calm and detached. Aim the cannon. The massive weapon began to align. Panic rippled across every side of the battlefield at once. They're going to fire. Are they insane? That blast will erase the whole area. Colin stumbled to a stop for half a second, staring up at the enormous cannon as it turned toward the trapped zone. Suzaku's face finally changed. Even he had not expected this. Zero's hand rose slowly toward his mask, toward the slit hiding his left eye. If the cannon fired, then this was it. At the edge of the battlefield, CC watched from concealment, silent and tense. And high above them, Naruto saw everything. Inside the Izanagi, his breath caught as the Avalon's main cannon began to charge. Below, he could see the cluster of lives about to be erased. Zero. Suzaku. Colin. Then his eyes found her. Yuffie. She was running toward the blast zone on foot, reckless and terrified and utterly unable to stop what was coming. Naruto's eyes widened. No. His gaze snapped to Colin, still too close. Then back to Euphemia, moving from the opposite side. In one sickening instant, he understood how little time he had. The cannon's charge rose. Colin looked up and screamed, please. Euphemia kept running, her voice breaking. Stop. Don't fire. Naruto's heart slammed against his ribs. Colin. Yuffie. For a second, Kurama's warning echoed again in the back of his mind. You keep abusing those eyes, brat. Naruto's hands tightened on the controls. His vision pulsed. Pain sparked behind his eyes before the Mangekyo had even fully formed. He knew what using it meant. He knew every time he reached for that power, he was carving away another piece of his sight. Another piece of the future. Another chance to see the people he cared about clearly. For half a breath, Naruto hesitated. Then he saw Colin turn toward the light. He saw Euphemia still running. And whatever fear he had for himself vanished beneath something far stronger. Damn it, Naruto snarled, crimson burning in his eyes. Go blind, go to hell, I don't care. The Tomo twisted. The Mangekyo Sharingan bloomed. 4 sharp triangles spiraled around his pupils, dark and red and vicious, the pattern opening like a wound. I'm not losing either of them. The Izanagi screamed as Naruto wrenched the controls so hard the frame nearly tore itself apart. Warning lights exploded across the cockpit. Thrusters flared at maximum. The battlefield stretched in his sight, every motion slowing, every path unfolding, every possible death drawing itself in front of him in terrible clarity. The Avalon's cannon flashed. Naruto drove the Izanagi straight into the firing line. Not away. Not around. Straight through. His Mangekyo burned hotter. The world blurred at the edges, but Naruto ignored it. The pain behind his eyes became sharp enough to make his teeth grind, but he pushed harder. He saw only the blast. Only Colin. Only Yuffie. The Izanagi became a black streak across the sky, tearing toward the doomed center of the battlefield as the cannon fired. And Naruto, half-blinded by power and fury, threw himself between the blast and the two girls he refused to lose. Suzaku returned to consciousness slowly. The first thing he noticed was the sound of waves. Then wind. Then pain. A dull ache rolled through his body as his senses came back piece by piece. He opened his eyes to a bright sky broken by swaying branches overhead, sunlight flickering through green leaves in uneven flashes. For a moment, he only stared upward, disoriented. Then memory slammed back into him. The Avalon. The cannon. Suzaku shot upright with a sharp breath. Only the crash of surf somewhere beyond the trees. He pushed himself to his feet too quickly and swayed, one hand going to his head as the world tilted. Sand and rock stretched around him, broken by patches of thick greenery. The air was warm and damp, heavy with salt and vegetation. There was no sign of the Lancelot. No wreckage. No soldiers. No voices. Suzaku turned slowly, taking in the unfamiliar shoreline and the dense growth beyond it. This isn't Shikin, he muttered. Then his brow furrowed. Or, maybe somewhere near it. The plants looked similar enough. The air felt the same. He had to be somewhere in the same island chain, probably thrown clear by the blast. Wherever he was alone. At least, that was what he thought. Several meters away, half hidden behind a cluster of rocks and brush, Naruto stirred. He had collapsed against a damaged outcrop, one arm braced awkwardly beneath him. His eyes opened slowly, unfocused at first, and he grimaced as he forced himself upright. Ah, he muttered, rubbing the back of his head. That went about as badly as it possibly could have. Then he saw Suzaku. Naruto froze. Instinct took over, and he immediately dropped lower behind the rocks. Suzaku had not noticed him. For 1 second, Naruto considered calling out. Then he stopped himself. Too many unknowns. He had no idea where Euphemia was. No idea where Colin had landed. No idea whether Britannian patrols were nearby. And worst of all, he had no clue how much Suzaku had seen before the blast tore everything apart. So Naruto stayed silent. And watched. Suzaku scanned the area one last time before setting his jaw. Water first, he said quietly. Then I find the others. He started inland. Naruto waited a few seconds, then slipped after him, moving low and quiet through the brush. His body still ached from the force of the blast, and the pressure behind his eyes had not fully faded, but he forced himself to ignore it. He needed answers before he revealed himself. It did not take long for Suzaku to hear running water. He pushed through a curtain of hanging vines and stepped into a narrow clearing ringed by stone and thick green growth. A waterfall spilled down into a clear pool below, its spray catching the sunlight in a thin silver mist. And there, standing beneath the falling water, was Colin. Very much unclothed. Suzaku froze so completely it was almost impressive. For 1 full second, his mind simply stopped working. Colin turned at the shift in the air. The moment she saw him, her eyes went wide. Then everything happened at once. With a sharp gasp, she snatched her Black Knight's uniform from where it had been left on the rocks and threw it across herself with one arm. With the other, she reached for a small pouch lying beside her clothes. Suzaku's eyes caught the movement. The pouch. Not civilian belongings. Not just some stranded girl trying to survive. Recognition hit him all at once. Colin. But she was already moving. Humiliation and fury burned across her face as she lunged at him, the pouch clutched in her hand. Suzaku jerked back on instinct. Wait. Shut up. Colin drove toward him hard, trying to force past his guard and strike. Suzaku, still reeling from the situation and trying very hard not to think about what he had accidentally walked in on, nearly fumbled the defense. But training won out. He caught her wrist, twisted, and used her own momentum against her, forcing her down against the rocky ground. Colin snarled and fought him every inch of the way. Get off me. I'm trying not to hurt you. Then let go. Suzaku pinned her arm more firmly, breathing hard. No. Colin glared up at him, teeth bared. Fine, she snapped. Then hear it clearly, Britannian lapdog. I'm one of the Black Knights. Suzaku stared down at her, chest rising and falling. I kind of figured that out. Behind the rocks farther back, Naruto shut his eyes for a brief second. This is bad, he muttered under his breath. Suzaku swallowed once, then tightened his grip just enough to stop Colin from trying anything else. Colin Stadfeld, he said, forcing his voice to stay steady, I'm placing you under arrest. She laughed once, sharp and furious. Are you serious? Don't you call me that, my name is Colin Kazuki. You're half Japanese. No, either way it does not matter. That's pathetic. A few miserable, deeply awkward minutes later, Suzaku had managed to let Colin dress while keeping enough distance not to make the situation worse. After that, he bound her wrists behind her back with a length of stripped cord and seated her against a rock near the edge of the clearing. Colin looked absolutely murderous. Suzaku sat a short distance away, still trying very hard not to think about the first 30 seconds of their reunion. Start talking, he said. Colin gave him a flat look. About what? Where are we? She shifted against the rock. If I knew that, I wouldn't be stuck here with you. Suzaku frowned. You really don't know. No. He studied her face, searching for any sign of a lie. He found none. Colin winced slightly as the restraints pulled tight, then glared at him again. You deserve this, by the way. Suzaku blinked. Excuse me. This, Colin said, jerking her chin toward the island around them. Being stranded. Cut off. Alone. Her mouth twisted. The Black Knights will find you eventually. And when they do, you're the one getting dragged back in chains. Suzaku ignored the threat. If Zero comes for you. Colin's expression did not change. Who is he? Suzaku finished. Colin stared at him for one beat. Then another. Then she smirked. Why don't you find that out for yourself? Suzaku's eyes narrowed. That answer told him something anyway. She did not know. Or if she did not know enough to use it. He shifted tactics. Then why follow him? Colin's smirk turned colder. You should find that out for yourself too. Suzaku let out a slow breath. You're impossible. So I've been told. Hidden nearby, Naruto rested the back of his head lightly against the rock and stared up at the sky for half a second. Great, he murmured. Suzaku captured my girlfriend. He rubbed a hand over his face, then carefully peered back toward them. And if I step in too early, he added under his breath, I'm going to have to explain way too much. Elsewhere on the island, Lelouch walked along the rocky coastline with a pounding headache and an increasingly terrible understanding of just how bad his luck truly was. He had survived the blast. Apparently. He had survived being thrown clear of the battlefield. Also apparently. But he had no idea where he was, how far he had landed from Shikin, or whether anyone else had made it out. The island or whatever stretch of coastline this was, looked close enough in climate and terrain to be nearby. Unfortunately, that did nothing to solve his real problems. No transport. No contacts. No support. And then he saw her. Euphemia stood farther down the shore, her dress torn slightly from the landing, her long hair disturbed by the wind as she stared out over the water like she had not yet decided whether any of this was real. Lelouch went still. Euphemia sensed movement and turned. For one long second, they only stared at each other. Then Lelouch moved first. He drew the handgun he had managed to keep and aimed it at her. Euphemia looked at the weapon. Then at him. Lelouch, she said softly. He flinched. The name, spoken in that voice, did more damage than any bullet could have. Don't, he said. But his hand was no longer steady. Euphemia's expression changed. Not fear. Not really. Recognition. That was worse. I knew it, she whispered. Lelouch's eyes narrowed. Have you told anyone? No. She shook her head immediately. No, I haven't told anyone. I swear it. He kept the gun raised, though his breathing had gone shallow. How? Euphemia took one careful step closer. Little things, she said. The way you spoke. The way you moved. The way you looked at me. Her violet eyes filled with tears before she could stop them. And because I wanted it to be you. That nearly broke him. Lelouch's jaw tightened. That makes no sense. It does to me. He should have silenced her. Threatened her. Used Geass the moment he had the chance. Instead, he stood there, trapped between old memories and the unbearable way she was looking at him, as if something precious had just been returned to her from the dead. Show me, Euphemia said suddenly. Lelouch stared at her. What? Your face. Her voice trembled now. Before you decide whether to kill me or not, let me see your face. He should not have done it. He knew that. But the shore was quiet except for the sea, and Euphemia's voice had gone painfully small, and for one brief moment Lelouch was no longer Zero. No longer an exile. No longer a prince hiding beneath a mask and a lie. He was just Lelouch. Slowly, he lowered the gun. Then he removed the mask. Euphemia's breath caught. Tears slipped down her cheeks, and then she laughed softly through them, the sound fragile and full of relief. It really is you, she whispered. Lelouch looked away, unable to bear the look on her face. Yes, he said quietly. It's me. And on another part of the island, hidden from both Suzaku and Colin, Naruto crouched behind the rocks with growing dread. Somehow, this island had become far more complicated than even he had feared. The command deck aboard the Avalon was louder than usual, not with panic, but with the tightly controlled urgency of people trying very hard not to admit they had lost track of too many important individuals at once. A Britannian officer stepped forward with a report in hand and an expression that suggested he would rather be anywhere else. We still have no visual confirmation on Princess Euphemia's location, sir, he said. Search teams are sweeping the coast and interior. Metal detectors are being used in case she was buried or trapped beneath debris. Another official, pale and tense, added, Sir Suzaku Kururugi also remains unaccounted for. That alone was bad enough. Then a second aide cleared his throat. And, Sir Naruto Namikaze is also missing as well. That shifted the atmosphere on the bridge immediately. Several heads turned. Lloyd, who had just finished climbing down from inspecting the recovered Lancelot, blinked. Oh dear, he said. That's politically inconvenient. Cecile shot him a look. That is one way of putting it. The Lancelot had been recovered from the battle zone after the Black Knights retreated and the Gefgen interference cleared, but the same could not be said for its pilot, or for several others who had been in the kill zone when the Avalon fired. And standing farther back on the command deck, Prince Schneisel looked as composed as ever. Lloyd turned toward him with a bright, almost conversational expression. You know, it's still marvelously unfair that you took our floating systems research and produced all this. He gestured grandly at the Avalon, the airship around them, and then up toward the mounted Hadron cannon. Schneisel smiled faintly. You make it sound so crude, Lloyd. It was admiration, Lloyd said. Mostly. Cecile, still recovering from the shock of first seeing Schneisel aboard the Avalon, stared at him with enough visible disbelief that General Bartley noticed and bristled. Watch your expression, Bartley said sharply. His Highness is not a sight to be gawked at. That only made Cecile's eyes widen further. When she had first seen Schneisel standing on the command deck, she had actually slipped coming down from the Lancelot's platform and landed squarely on her rear. Nice one, Lloyd had said at the time, which had not helped. Now Cecile regained some of her composure and looked between Schneisel, the Avalon systems, and the cannon with increasingly troubled eyes. Lloyd, meanwhile, tilted his head at Bartley. And your loyalty, General. That's still an interesting arrangement. Bartley's expression remained hard. His Highness saved me from a prison sentence. I serve because I choose to. Schneisel waved off the implied gratitude. I would prefer competence over thanks. Then he turned to leave, leaving Lloyd staring after him with a thoughtful expression. Cecile stepped closer once Bartley had moved away. It was him, wasn't it? She said quietly. He gave the order. And he fired the cannon. Lloyd hummed. Undoubtedly. Cecile's face tightened. Suzaku was down there. So was Zero, Lloyd said lightly, though not unkindly. That isn't the point. Lloyd glanced sidelong at her, then toward the departing prince. His Highness would likely say it was. A few moments later, when Schneizel passed close enough again, Cecile found herself speaking before she could stop. Did you truly believe Suzaku would survive that? Schneizel paused. Then, with infuriating calm, he answered, I believed it was a necessary precaution. His pale eyes shifted toward the windows beyond the bridge. And I gambled on the possibility that he would survive. Cecile stared at him. Schneizel inclined his head slightly. I apologize if my concern for a subordinate did not outweigh the immediate military necessity in that moment. It was not a real apology. They all knew it. And then he was gone again. Lloyd let out a small sigh. Well, charming as ever. Elsewhere, on another part of the island, Lelouch had managed to get a small fire going. Euphemia sat nearby, wrapped in what he had managed to salvage and dry enough not to freeze, while Lelouch crouched beside the flames, trying not to think too hard about how absurd this entire situation had become. At last Euphemia broke the silence. I guessed because of what you said at Lake Kawaguchi, she admitted quietly. Lelouch looked at her from across the fire. Guessed what? That you were Zero. He went still. Euphemia gave a faint, uncertain smile. Not at first. Not completely. I only thought, maybe. But after that, I kept noticing things. And you told no one. Her expression dimmed. Cornelia never listens when it matters. Not really. She lowered her gaze. And I didn't want to be right. Lelouch said nothing to that. After a moment, Euphy looked up again. Nunnally is safe, isn't she? That softened him despite himself. Yes, he said. She's safe. Euphemia visibly relaxed. Then Lelouch asked, more abruptly than she expected, do you know who killed Marianne? Euphy blinked. Your mother. He nodded once. Euphemia's face turned sad. No, I don't. She clasped her hands loosely in her lap. Cornelia has been investigating it for years. But no one truly knows. Lelouch looked away, jaw tight. After a moment, Euphemia asked softly, then who are you? Right now, I mean. He stared into the fire for a few seconds before answering. Lelouch. Right now I am your idiot of an older brother. Not Zero. Not a prince. Not a mask. Just Lelouch. Euphy's eyes softened, and she said nothing more. Instead, they both turned their attention to more practical matters. Lelouch began trying to dig a pit near the edge of the clearing. For a trap? Euphemia asked. Yes. After several minutes, the shovel struck stone with a dull, useless clunk. Lelouch stared down at the rocky ground in disgust. Of course. Euphy stood. I'll look for berries. Lelouch looked up sharply. Alone. I won't go far, she promised. He frowned, but after a second nodded. Be careful. She smiled faintly. You too. On another stretch of the island, Suzaku sat near a stream with a makeshift fishing line in hand. To his own mild surprise, it was actually working. Colin sat a short distance away with her hands tied behind her back, glaring at the water like she was hoping it would boil out of spite. Suzaku pulled up a small fish and studied it. Well, he said. That's something. Colin rolled her eyes. Congratulations. Suzaku set the fish aside and glanced over at her. You could help, you know. With what? Moral support. With finding food. Colin snorted. Right. Because helping the guy who tied me up is very high on my list of priorities. Suzaku held her gaze. If you help, I'll loosen the restraints. That got her attention. Her eyes narrowed. You're bargaining. Yes. With me. Yes. Colin looked away and muttered, I hate you. Suzaku gave her a faint smile. No, you don't. She shot him a glare sharp enough to cut through steel. For a while, the only sound between them was the stream running over stone and the distant crash of waves beyond the trees. Suzaku adjusted the line again, but his focus was no longer really on the fish. Eventually, he spoke more quietly. Colin. Did Naruto know? Colin went very still. Suzaku looked over at her. About you. About the Black Knights. She did not answer right away. That hesitation told him almost as much as a confession would have. Colin. Her jaw tightened. Why do you care? Suzaku looked back toward the water, choosing his words carefully. Because if Naruto knew you were involved with the Black Knights and still stayed close to you, then that changes how I'm looking at this. Colin's eyes narrowed slightly. How? It means he was protecting you, Suzaku said. Or at least trying to. Maybe not from everything, but from enough. He paused. It means he had to choose what to do with that truth every time he saw you at school. Every time he heard about the Black Knights. Every time he stood between one side and the other. Colin's expression shifted, but she said nothing. Suzaku's voice softened. That sounds like something Naruto would do for someone he cares about. The words landed harder than Colin expected. She looked down at the ground, her fingers curling behind her back. She stopped, swallowed, and looked away toward the trees. He knew enough. Suzaku watched her closely. So he did know. Colin's face turned complicated. Not angry. Not defensive. Something quieter than that. Something that hurt more. He didn't care, she said. Suzaku blinked. Colin's voice lowered. Not about me being in the Black Knights. Not about me being half Britannian. Not about any of the things I thought would make him look at me differently. Her throat tightened, but she forced the words out anyway. He just looked at me and saw me. Suzaku did not interrupt. Colin stared at the stream, but she was not really seeing it anymore. He loved me for who I was, she said softly. Not the sick girl I pretended to be at school. Not just the Black Knight. Not some symbol. Just me. Her voice thinned into something almost too quiet to hear. Even when I don't deserve it. Suzaku's expression softened. For a moment, Colin's mind went back to the argument. Suzaku looked away first, giving her the mercy of not staring too openly. After a while, he said, that sounds like him. Colin let out a small, humorless breath. Yeah. Suzaku adjusted the fishing line again, then glanced back at her. And you still let him get close to you. Colin's head snapped up. It wasn't like that. Suzaku raised one hand quickly. I didn't mean. Yes, you did, Colin shot back. Then her anger faltered. She looked down again. And no, she said, quieter now. It wasn't. Suzaku studied her for a long moment, then turned back toward the water. A few seconds passed. Then he said, Mito would kill me if I said what I was just thinking. Colin blinked. Then, despite herself, the corner of her mouth twitched. Good. Suzaku smiled faintly. The island was still dangerous. They were still stranded. They were still enemies in every practical sense that mattered. But for the first time since waking there, the silence between them felt a little less sharp. The Avalon drifted over the waters above the submerged Black Knight's submarine like a predator passing over something it had not yet noticed. Inside the submarine, the atmosphere was brittle. Todo stood near the central table with his arms folded, expression hard and practical as ever. We should withdraw, he said. For now. Diethard turned toward him immediately. Withdraw. He sounded offended by the word itself. Zero and Colin are still on that island. And if we blunder upward now, Todo replied, we lose more than them. Ogi stood between the two viewpoints, visibly strained. The recovered Gurren had been brought aboard, damaged but salvageable, and it sat like a silent accusation in the bay beyond. Diethard spread one hand. Everything about the Black Knights revolves around Zero. The man is the axis we turn on. Without him, we become another armed faction waiting to be crushed. Todo's eyes narrowed. No single life outweighs the entire organization. His might, Diethard said flatly. Or close enough. That drew a sharp breath from several people nearby. Tamaki looked between them and muttered, this is going great. CC, who had been silent until then, finally spoke. He's alive. Every eye in the room turned toward her. Ogi frowned. You know that for certain. Yes. Tamaki threw up his hands. What kind of answer is that? Yes. That's not proof, that's you being a dumbass again. CC slowly turned her head toward him. Would you like, she asked evenly, to repeat that more slowly? Tamaki straightened immediately. I said, You said enough. Ogi cut in before the argument could ignite any further. He rubbed a hand over his face, then forced himself to speak with authority. We hide. Regroup. Then go back in tomorrow night. There was a pause. Toto nodded first. Acceptable. Diethard looked irritated, but after a second said, as long as we do go back. We will, Ogi said. That settled it. Later, alone in a dim corridor, CC walked with her arms folded and her gaze distant. This is in poor taste, she murmured. No one visible answered her. Still, she kept talking to the unseen presence as if it stood beside her. Stranding all of them together on that island. Really? She clicked her tongue softly. You always did have a tendency toward cruel little amusements. She went quiet, listening to something only she could hear, then sighed. Yes. I know. I just wish you didn't drag Naruto as well. That evening on the island, Euphemia came back with berries gathered in the fold of her skirt. I found some, she said brightly, though her voice still held fatigue around the edges. Lelouch looked up from where he sat near the small fire. I'm surprised you found edible ones. Euphi knelt beside him and set them down. That sounds suspiciously ungrateful. He took one and looked at it. I'm just cautious. She smiled faintly. You always were. For a time they ate in silence. Then the sky darkened fully, and the stars came out. Euphemia tilted her face upward. Do you remember? She asked softly. Lelouch already knew what she meant. Nunnally used to love nights like this. And your mother too, Euphi said. That made something in Lelouch tighten. The two of them sat there beneath the stars, and for a little while the years between then and now felt thinner than they should have. I wish, Euphemia said quietly, that we could go back to those days. Lelouch kept his eyes on the sky. So do I. That was the truth. And because it was, it hurt. Elsewhere on the island, Suzaku and Colin sat near a small fire. The flames crackled softly between them, throwing uneven light across the rocks and trees. The night air was cooler now, and the ocean could be heard somewhere beyond the brush, waves breaking steadily against the shore. Suzaku had managed to catch more fish, and Colin was eating with a kind of direct, unguarded appetite that would have been impossible for the fragile, carefully restrained Colin Statfeld she pretended to be at school. Despite everything, Suzaku found himself smiling. Colin noticed immediately. What? He blinked. What? Why are you looking at me like that? Suzaku shook his head lightly. It's just, kind of charming. Colin almost choked. What? You're more lively like this, he said honestly. Her face went red at once, and she looked away sharply. Shut up. For a few seconds, the only sound between them was the quiet crackle of the fire. Then Suzaku's smile faded. Colin. She did not look at him. He stared into the flames for a moment, then said, Leave the Black Knights. Colin turned back toward him at once. No. You know what will happen if Britannia catches you, Suzaku said. Capital punishment isn't just a threat anymore. I said no. Colin. Her eyes hardened. I'm not running. Suzaku let out a slow breath. Then at least stop pretending this ends well. Colin laughed bitterly. You think your side ends well? Suzaku had no answer for that. Colin leaned forward, her voice low and fierce. I'm the Gurren's pilot. I chose this. And if I have to, I'll beat you myself. Suzaku went still. You. Yes, Colin said. That was me. He stared at her for a long moment, then looked down. Colin's anger only sharpened. Your reformism only keeps you standing with the enemy. The last samurai, Genbu Kururugi would be ashamed to see what you've become. The words struck hard. Suzaku's face changed. And if I stop fighting, Colin continued, then Naoto's death means nothing. The fire shifted between them, sparks rising into the dark. Suzaku's jaw tightened. Then, very quietly, he said, I killed my father. Colin froze. Suzaku kept staring at the flames. That's the truth. For a second, she said nothing at all. Then, softly, what? Suzaku's voice grew more strained, but he forced the words out anyway. I thought stopping the war would save lives. I thought if he wouldn't listen, then, he shut his eyes briefly. I was wrong. Colin stared at him, her anger faltering despite herself. Suzaku looked back at her then, pain and frustration cutting through his expression. Zero and my father are alike in one way, he said. They justify death with purpose. They decide certain lives are acceptable losses because they serve something bigger. His eyes sharpened. That's narcissism, Colin. Dressing it up as necessity doesn't change what it is. Colin's expression went cold again. And doing nothing changes anything. She shot back. If I stop, if I just walk away, then what? I move on. Is that what you tell yourself? Suzaku frowned. Colin pressed on, anger and grief bleeding into every word. I'll move on when Naoto's killer faces justice. But no one even knows who that is. So all I have left is this. Her hands clenched against her knees. The belief that his death meant something. Suzaku looked away. For a while, neither of them spoke. The fire popped quietly. Colin stared at it until the heat blurred slightly in her eyes, then her expression shifted. Something hesitant crossed her face, as if the question had been sitting there for too long and she hated herself a little for asking it. Suzaku, answer me this at least though. He glanced back at her. She kept her gaze on the flames. How has Naruto been? Suzaku's expression changed with surprise. Colin's mouth tightened. I mean, since everything happened. The engagement. All of it. She did not know that Naruto was listening. Not far from them, hidden high among the rocks and dark foliage, Naruto went still. Suzaku was quiet for a moment. Then he sighed softly. Annoyed, he said. Colin looked up. Suzaku leaned back slightly, his wrists resting over his knees. Very annoyed. Most of the time, he looks like he's one bad comment away from blowing up the entire settlement just to make everyone stop talking to him. Despite herself, Colin almost smiled. Suzaku's expression sobered. But it's more than that. Colin's fingers curled slightly. He seems angry, Suzaku continued, choosing his words carefully. And he is. But sometimes he looks sad. Like something is weighing on him, and he's trying to pretend it isn't. Colin's gaze dropped. The guilt hit harder than she expected. We argued, she said quietly. Suzaku looked at her. When? At your party, Colin admitted. Back at Ashford. Suzaku's brows drew together. About what? Colin was silent for a moment. Then she exhaled, the sound shaky and frustrated. About the entire situation, she said. The engagement. Euphemia. Like it was all fine just because some emperor said so. Her voice lowered. I saw him standing there, going along with it. Smiling when people looked at him. Staying calm. Acting like he could handle it. Her hands tightened. And I hated it. Suzaku watched her carefully. Colin swallowed. I hated that he looked fine, she said. Because I wasn't. I was angry, and scared, and jealous, and I didn't know what to do with any of it. She looked down at her bound hands. So I took it out on him. In the shadows, Naruto's breath caught faintly. Colin's voice grew softer. He just wanted a moment with me, I think. That's all. He kept looking at my face like he was trying to figure out what I was feeling. Or maybe whether I still cared. She gave a small, bitter laugh. And I yelled at him. Suzaku said nothing. Colin's shoulders sagged a little. I told myself I was angry because he wasn't fighting hard enough. Because he was letting them pull him into all of it. But that wasn't fair. Her jaw tightened. He didn't choose this. He didn't ask for any of it. And instead of being there for him, I made him feel worse. Suzaku looked into the fire again, his expression quiet. After a moment, he said, Naruto hides things when he thinks people will worry. Colin looked at him. Suzaku's voice softened. He acts annoyed because it's easier than letting people see he's hurting. Colin's chest tightened. I know, she whispered. That was the problem. She did know. She had seen it before. The grin that came too quickly. The joke that covered too much. The way he stepped between other people in danger as if being hurt himself was somehow easier than watching someone else suffer. And she had still yelled at him. From his hiding place, Naruto looked away. For one moment, he considered stepping out. He wanted to tell her it was all right. He wanted to tell her he understood. He wanted to tell Suzaku to untie her before he had to explain to Kushina why one of his oldest friends had tied up his girlfriend on a deserted island. But he stayed where he was. Because stepping out now would not make things simpler. It would shatter what little balance remained. Eventually, exhaustion began to win. Colin drifted off first, still looking troubled even in sleep. Suzaku stayed awake longer, watching the fire burn lower, his expression distant and unreadable. On the other part of the island, Euphemia had fallen asleep as well, curled lightly against a tree with her hands folded in her lap. Lelouch sat nearby, watching the distant shoreline in silence. And hidden above the rocks, Naruto remained still. He had watched enough. He knew Colin was alive. He knew Suzaku was alive. And he knew that revealing himself now would only make everything worse. For a moment, he considered it anyway. Should he step out? If he did, Suzaku would have questions. Colin would have questions. And depending on how those questions were answered, the fragile line holding everything together might break completely. Kurama's voice stirred within him. And what exactly would that accomplish? Naruto frowned slightly. You reveal yourself, and then what? Kurama continued. You explain why you were here. Why you stayed hidden. Why you let Suzaku capture the girl. At best, they mistrust you. At worst, both of them turn on you. Naruto let out a long, quiet sigh. Yeah, he murmured. I know. He looked once more toward Colin, sleeping uneasily near Suzaku. His expression softened. Then he looked away. With that, Naruto rose soundlessly and slipped into the dark, moving to find Euphemia before anyone else did. Far out at sea, the Avalon finally arrived in the area and discovered a small cave entrance built into the island rock, one Clovis had once used for private purposes and never meant anyone else to find. The searchlights swept over the shoreline. Lelouch saw them first. His eyes narrowed. Britannia. A moment later, on another stretch of coast, Suzaku spotted them too and rose at once. Both of them understood the same thing immediately. Whatever uneasy quiet the island had offered them, it was over. Naruto moved quietly through the dark, following the faintest traces he could pick up now that the island had finally gone still enough for him to think. He was looking for Euphemia. That was what he told himself, anyway. Not because he was worried about Lelouch too. Not because he had already guessed there was a very real chance the two of them had ended up near each other. Just Euphi. That was the story. The trees thinned as he reached another rocky stretch of the island, and the moment he caught sight of them through the brush, Naruto stopped dead. Euphemia sat beneath a tree near the remains of a small fire. And right beside her, was Lelouch. Naruto shut his eyes for one long second. Damn it. Inside him, Kurama's laughter rumbled warm and merciless. Well, don't you have it rough. Naruto folded his arms and glared into the dark as if that might somehow stop the fox from continuing. Go on, Kurama said, still amused. Say it out loud. The two girls you have relationships with are stuck with your two best friends. That's almost poetic. Naruto's eye twitched. Very funny. It is, actually. Naruto looked again. Lelouch was sitting a little forward, saying something too quiet for Naruto to fully catch, while Euphemia listened with that soft, earnest focus she always seemed to give people she cared about. And there it was again, that strange, unwelcome knot in Naruto's chest. Not jealousy exactly. Not entirely. Just irritation. Complication. The kind of feeling that came from realizing life had become ridiculous in a way no amount of preparation could fix. Kurama, of course, noticed all of it. You could go say hello. Naruto snorted quietly. And interrupt whatever weird exiled prince and princess brother-sister reunion they've got going on. That would be entertaining. Naruto stayed crouched where he was, hidden by the rock and brush, watching the pair by the fire. Yuffie looked tired, but safe. That's all that mattered. Lelouch looked like he was holding himself together through pure stubbornness. That also tracked. For a moment Naruto considered stepping out anyway. Just enough to make sure Yuffie was alright. Just enough to drag her away before things got any stranger. But then he imagined the conversation that would follow. Why was he here? How much had he seen? Why had he stayed hidden? What exactly was he doing on the island at all? Kurama hummed knowingly. So you're hiding again. Naruto frowned. I'm being smart. You're sulking. I'm not sulking. You said, damn it, in your head like a jealous husband. Naruto nearly choked. I did not. Kurama laughed again, utterly unhelpful. You did. Naruto dragged a hand down his face and looked skyward for patience that did not exist. Below, Euphemia shifted a little closer to the fire, and Lelouch took off part of his coat to drape it around her shoulders. Naruto stared. Kurama made a pleased noise that was definitely mocking. Oh, that's excellent. Shut up. You have my sympathy, truly. Naruto let out a slow breath through his nose, then muttered, I came all the way out here to make sure she was okay, and now I've got to stand here watching my best friend, who is also my fiancé's brother, play tragic gentleman. Meanwhile your girlfriend is stranded with your other best friend. Naruto closed his eyes. Why are you like this? Because this is funny. Naruto looked back toward the fire one last time. Yuffie was safe. That was the important part. Lelouch was with her, which meant she probably would stay safe at least until Britannia or the Black Knights found them. He should leave. He knew that. Instead he lingered for another few seconds, just long enough to make sure neither of them was in immediate danger. Then he pushed himself silently back from the brush. Fine, he muttered. She's okay. That's what matters. Kurama's voice softened just a fraction. It is. Naruto nodded once, though his eyes remained on the pair for another second before he finally turned away. Still, as he slipped back into the dark of the island, he couldn't help one last bitter little thought. Seriously, he muttered under his breath, this whole island can go to hell. Morning came gray and cool over the island, the first light filtering through mist and trees as if the world itself was still half asleep. Somewhere deep in the island's interior, Naruto had already found the clearing. He stood at the edge of a grassy rise, half hidden beneath the shade of thick branches, staring down at the massive structure partially unearthed below. Stone and metal jutted from the ground in unnatural angles, overgrown by moss, roots, and years of neglect. Whatever it was, it had been buried for a long time. And it did not belong there. Naruto's eyes narrowed. Well, he muttered under his breath, that's not ominous at all. The place felt wrong. There was a weight in the air around it, something that made the hairs on the back of his neck rise. It reminded him too much of the strange pressure he sometimes felt around Geass, unnatural, invasive, like the world had been bent in a way it was never supposed to bend. Kurama stirred faintly inside him. You feel that too, brat. Naruto's expression tightened. Yeah. He did not like that answer. Before he could move closer, voices reached him from the left. Naruto crouched instinctively, slipping behind the thick trunk of a tree just as two figures climbed the ridge from the opposite side. Lelouch and Euphemia. Naruto's eyes widened slightly. What the hell? He whispered. Why did they both had to come here of all places? Lelouch and Euphemia stopped near the edge of the rise, both looking down toward the hidden structure below. Lelouch's posture stiffened. Even with the mask on, Naruto could tell he was unsettled. Euphemia's violet eyes widened as she stared into the clearing. What is that? I don't know, Lelouch said quietly. But from the way he said it, Naruto could tell he had already started thinking through what it meant. Britannia had not come here for a simple inspection. Before Naruto could decide whether to reveal himself, another sound cut through the morning mist. Movement from the right. Lelouch turned sharply. Naruto shifted lower behind the tree. Suzaku emerged first, moving carefully through the brush. Colin walked beside him, wrists still bound, though from the look of the loosened rope, she had been working at it for a while. Naruto's breath caught. Then Colin saw him. Her eyes widened. Naruto. The sound of his name tore through the fragile stillness. Euphemia turned instantly. Naruto. Suzaku's head snapped toward him. Naruto. Lelouch went completely still. Naruto slowly stepped out from behind the tree, one hand raised slightly like he already knew this was about to become a disaster. Before anyone asks, he said, yes, I'm aware this looks bad. Colin stared at him. For a moment, the anger, exhaustion, and tension on her face all broke beneath something brighter. Relief. Happiness. The kind she could not hide fast enough. After the blast, after the Avalon, after everything, he was standing right there. Her chest tightened so hard it almost hurt. But the relief came tangled with questions. Why was he here? How long had he been here? Had he been looking for her? Was he still angry about the argument? The thought dimmed some of the warmth in her eyes before she could stop it. Naruto noticed. Of course he noticed. His expression softened for half a second before the situation around them demanded his attention again. Suzaku looked between Naruto, Colin, Euphemia, and Zero, clearly struggling to keep up. Why are you here? Naruto gave him a flat look. I could ask literally everyone here the same thing. Euphemia stepped forward, relief clear across her face. Naruto, are you hurt? I'm fine, he said quickly, though his gaze lingered on her long enough to make sure she was too. Are you? She nodded. Yes. Lelouch's mind, meanwhile, was moving at full speed. Naruto was here. Not trailing Suzaku and Colin. Not with Euphemia. Not with any clear group. He had been here first. Which meant he had either found this place before the rest of them, or he had been searching the island on his own and reached it by coincidence. Neither possibility made Lelouch comfortable. His gaze flicked toward the structure below. Then toward Naruto. How much had he seen? How much did he know? Before the questions could fully settle, Suzaku's expression hardened as his eyes returned to Zero. You, he said. Lelouch reacted instantly. In one smooth motion, he stepped beside Euphemia and raised his handgun, angling it close enough to make everyone freeze. Euphemia stiffened. Lelouch leaned near her, voice low enough for only her to hear. Forgive me. Follow my lead. Euphemia's eyes widened, but after the smallest pause, she gave the faintest nod. Zero raised his voice. Stay back. Suzaku's face went cold. Zero. Naruto's eyes narrowed dangerously. What the hell is this? That, Lelouch thought bitterly, was becoming the question of the morning. Aloud, Zero said, a simple exchange. Princess Euphemia for Colin Kazuki. Colin shot him a sharp look, but recovered quickly. Suzaku stepped forward a fraction. Using a hostage now. That's your answer. It ensures her survival, Zero said coldly. Euphemia frowned. Suzaku, don't. Naruto's gaze cut across the scene. Colin's bound wrists. Suzaku's stance. Zero's gun. Euphemia held at his side. The hidden structure below. Every instinct Naruto had screamed that the situation was becoming too unstable. Everybody calm down, he said, stepping forward. No one needs to. No one listened. Colin had already begun shifting her hands. Naruto noticed first. Then Lelouch. Then Suzaku. The loosened rope slipped down just far enough. Colin moved. In one sharp motion, she hooked the rope beneath Suzaku's arms and yanked back hard, tangling him just enough to shatter the standoff. Colin. Suzaku shouted. Sorry. She snapped. Then, after half a second, no, actually, I'm not. Euphemia pulled away from Zero at once. Stop it. Naruto lunged forward. Colin, wait. Zero shifted toward her. Suzaku fought against the rope. Colin pulled harder. Euphemia moved toward them. And beneath all of them, buried under moss, dirt, and ancient stone, something answered. A massive red Geass sigil ignited beneath the ground. Naruto's head snapped down. What? The symbol pulsed under their feet, vast and glowing, its light bleeding through cracks in the earth. Lelouch froze. He had not done that. Far away, unseen by any of them, a boy smiled. Then the ground gave way. Stone split. Roots tore loose. The ledge collapsed beneath them all. Naruto reached for Euphemia. Colin shouted his name. Suzaku grabbed for the nearest solid edge and caught nothing. Zero vanished in the falling dust. All five of them dropped into the dark. The fall was chaos, stone, dirt, screams, and red light. The hidden structure groaned around them as the earth swallowed them whole, pulling them down into the depths beneath the island. When the dust settled, shouting erupted almost immediately from below. Britannian soldiers. All of them scrambling through the massive chamber they had fallen into. Lelouch coughed hard, one hand braced against the floor as he forced himself upright. His mask was still in place, thank God, but that was the only good thing he could say about the situation. The chamber around them was enormous. Stone and metal blended together in ways that looked far older than anything Britannia should have had buried beneath Shikin Island. Machinery hummed in the walls. Strange conduits ran along the floor and disappeared into the shadows. Far above, broken daylight filtered down through the collapsed opening they had fallen through. Lelouch had no idea what this place was. But he knew one thing immediately. Britannia had been hiding it. And now soldiers were already converging on them. Protect Princess Euphemia. Capture Zero. Secure the chamber. Sir Naruto. That last one made Naruto wince as he pushed himself to his feet. Oh, that's somehow worse, he muttered. Colin rose nearby, bruised and furious, shaking dust from her hair as her eyes swept the approaching troops. Suzaku had landed badly a few steps away, his body still half-stunned from the fall. For a moment, he only stared upward, toward where the red Geass sigil had burned across the ground before vanishing completely. Euphemia stirred beside Naruto, dazed but conscious. Naruto moved toward her at once, catching her gently by the arm before the surge of soldiers and panic could shove her off balance. Yuffie, he said sharply, stay behind me. She looked up at him, still shaken. Naruto. I'm fine, he said quickly, though his eyes were already moving across the chamber. Stay back. Britannian troops rushed in. Colin moved first. She launched herself at the nearest two soldiers, driving one to the ground with a hard strike and wrenching the rifle from the other before they could surround her. Her bound wrist slowed her for all of a second before she used the loosened rope itself as leverage, twisting into another strike with brutal efficiency. Move, she shouted. Lelouch's eyes darted around the chamber, searching for an exit, a weakness, a vehicle, anything he could use. Then he saw it. A massive black nightmare prototype rested deeper in the chamber, half shrouded by scaffolding and cables. It looked unfinished, but not inactive. Its frame was enormous, dark, and angular, unlike any standard unit Lelouch had ever seen. He did not know its name. He did not know why Britannia had brought it here. He only knew it was powered. And that was enough. That machine, Zero said. Colin followed his gaze and stared. You're kidding. No. Her eyes narrowed. Can you operate it? A faint, grim smile touched Lelouch's mouth beneath the mask. I'm about to find out. He moved. Colin broke from the fight and followed, covering him as best she could while soldiers regrouped and shouted for reinforcements. Suzaku finally shook himself free of his daze just in time to see Zero and Colin heading for the Black Nightmare. Zero. He started after them. Naruto saw the movement. For a split second, his instincts pulled him in the same direction. He could help them. He knew he could. A well-placed strike. A burst of chakra hidden under the confusion. One quick move, and he could give Lelouch and Colin all the time they needed to reach the machine and escape. With the chaos in the chamber, it would be easy to make it look like bad luck, falling debris, a soldier stumbling at the wrong moment. But then Euphemia shifted beside him. Naruto looked down at her. She was pale, frightened, and completely exposed in the middle of a chamber full of soldiers, weapons, and secrets no one was supposed to have seen. If he moved too much, if he showed too much, if he helped Zero too obviously, then every eye in the room would turn toward him. And worse, toward her. He could not protect Colin, protect Euphemia, and protect his own identity all at once. Not here. Not like this. His jaw tightened. Damn it, he whispered. Euphemia tried to move after Suzaku. Suzaku. Naruto caught her arm and held her back. No, he said sharply. Not that way. But Suzaku. He'll live. Naruto. She struggled for a second, but Naruto held firm, keeping himself between her and the nearest soldiers as smoke, dust, and gunfire filled the chamber. His eyes flicked once toward Colin. She was almost at the nightmare now. For half a heartbeat, she looked back. Their eyes met. Naruto's hand tightened at his side. Go, he thought. But he did not move. Zero reached the cockpit first. Colin leapt up after him. The black machine came alive with a deep, violent roar. The entire chamber shook. Naruto looked up at it with open disbelief. Well, that's not good. The machine lurched forward, ripping free of its supports and crushing through the nearest scaffolding with unfinished but terrifying power. Its weapons systems looked incomplete, and several outer components had clearly never been properly calibrated, but the frame itself was more than active enough. Then, to everyone's shock, it lifted from the ground. Colin's voice carried faintly from inside. It flies. Even Zero sounded almost amused now. Apparently. The prototype blasted upward in a storm of dust, debris, and outraged shouting, tearing through the collapsed opening and vanishing into the gray morning sky. For a few seconds, no one moved. Then the chamber exploded into chaos. Pursue them. Lock down the exits. The Gawain has launched. Who authorized activation? Get the engineers back to the control stations. Bartley's voice rose above several others, nearly hysterical. Do not let that unit leave the island. Naruto, still standing protectively in front of Euphemia, let out a long breath. Yeah, he muttered. That seems about right. As the immediate panic shifted toward pursuit, Britannian soldiers moved in on Suzaku instead. Sir Suzaku Kururugi, one of them said stiffly, you are under arrest for violation of military regulations. Suzaku stared at him. What? Euphemia pulled free of Naruto now that the danger around them had eased. No. That's ridiculous. Naruto released her at once, and she rushed toward Suzaku. This is absurd. She shouted. He was protecting me. One officer looked deeply uncomfortable. Your Highness, the order stands. Suzaku looked exhausted more than angry, as if the arrest itself no longer surprised him as much as it should have. Naruto stepped up beside Euphemia, his expression hard. You're arresting him after all that. The soldiers clearly did not want to answer him. One of them swallowed. Those are our instructions, Sir Naruto. Naruto grimaced. Don't call me that. No one looked brave enough to respond. Euphemia stepped directly in front of Suzaku, her violet eyes bright with anger. He is my knight, she said, voice trembling but firm. You will not touch him unless I permit it. The command stalled them. Only barely. From the upper gantry, a calm voice descended over the chamber. That will be enough. All eyes turned upward. Schneizel stood above them, composed as ever, untouched by the chaos spreading through the chamber below. His gaze moved over Suzaku, Euphemia, and Naruto before settling on his sister. Euphemia, he said, I give you my word that Sir Suzaku will be handled appropriately and returned to your service once this matter is sorted. Euphemia glared up at him. That is not good enough. Naruto stood just behind her shoulder, equally unimpressed. But for the moment, with soldiers everywhere, the Gawain gone, and the entire island still in uproar, neither of them had the power to stop what was already moving. Suzaku looked past Euphemia and met Naruto's eyes. There was confusion there. Questions. And something unsettled, something that had begun the moment Naruto had appeared in that clearing with all of them and only deepened in the chaos that followed. Naruto said nothing. He could not. Not here. Not with Euphemia beside him. Not with soldiers calling him Sir and watching every movement he made. Not with Zero and Colin escaping into the sky while he stood still and let them go. So Naruto only gave Suzaku the smallest nod. Later. It was not much. But for now, it had to be enough. Cornelia stood in rigid silence as the report finished playing for the third time. On the screen, the Lancelot's damaged system footage showed Suzaku surviving the bombardment in a way that should have been impossible. The data was fragmented, full of static and interference from the battle, but the result remained the same no matter how many times they reviewed it. He had lived. And not only that, he had moved in direct contradiction to what should have been possible inside that kill zone. Cornelia's fingers tightened against the edge of her desk. That is impossible, she said coldly. Guilford, standing beside the monitor, kept his posture straight. And yet the footage remains unchanged each time it is reviewed, Your Highness. Cornelia's eyes narrowed. Explain it. The technician nearest the console swallowed nervously. We cannot, Your Highness. The records show the Lancelot repositioning in the final second before impact. It appears Sir Kururugi found cover within the Nightmare's own frame. He had no time to do that, Cornelia snapped. No, Your Highness. The room fell quiet again. Cornelia hated unexplained things. Variables. Unknowns. Miracles that appeared in the middle of a battlefield and refused to be reduced into tactics, numbers, or cause and effect. And this was not the only matter threatening to spiral. Before she could press the point further, Guilford received another transmission. He looked down at it, and his expression changed almost immediately. Your Highness. Cornelia turned sharply. What now? Guilford stepped forward. We've received confirmation of a large-scale naval movement approaching Kyushu. Cornelia's face hardened. Whose fleet? The Chinese Federation. Guilford continued, voice grave. Their ships are flying the flag of Japan. Reports from the coast indicate fighting has already begun. Civilian casualties are expected to rise quickly if the conflict spreads inland. For a moment, even Cornelia said nothing. Then her jaw clenched. So, she said softly, dangerously, they've chosen to move now. It appears so, Guilford replied. Cornelia turned away from the monitor entirely, her mind already shifting to war footing. It was too much at once to be coincidence. Behind her, Euphemia stood pale and quiet, her hands clasped tightly together. She had listened to the report about Suzaku with breathless relief. Now she listened to the report about Kyushu with growing dread. War was spreading again. And beneath the political fear, beneath the concern for Suzaku and the lives already caught in the fighting, another worry rose quietly in her chest. Naruto. If Kyushu descended into chaos, if Britannia moved to crush the invasion, if the Chinese Federation pressed harder under the banner of Japan, where would that leave him? Euphemia lowered her gaze, trying not to let her worry show too openly. But eventually, the reports became too much. The room was full of voices now, officers speaking over one another, technicians pulling up maps, Guilford relaying updated projections while Cornelia issued quick, precise orders. Euphemia stood among them for another moment, then quietly stepped back. No one stopped her as she left. The doors closed behind her, muffling the sharp military voices within. The corridor outside felt colder. Euphemia moved down the hall with her hands still clasped together, her thoughts tangled around Suzaku, Kyushu, the Chinese Federation, and the horrible uncertainty of what would happen next. Then she heard Naruto's voice. Coming from the balcony near the end of the corridor. Euphemia slowed. Naruto stood outside with his phone pressed to his ear, one hand braced against the stone railing as the wind stirred the edge of his formal coat. His face was turned slightly away from her, but even from a distance she could see the hard set of his shoulders. Yeah, I saw the report, Naruto said quietly. No, Dad, I'm not going to do anything reckless. A pause. His mouth tightened. I know what that means. If Kyushu turns into a battlefield, the civilians will get trapped between Britannia and the Chinese Federation. We need evacuation routes ready before that happens. Euphemia's steps slowed further. Evacuation routes. Naruto continued, his voice sharpening with frustration. Then let me coordinate with the local branches. I can lead the evacuation effort from here if. He stopped. Not because of the call. Because he had noticed her. Naruto turned his head slightly, and his eyes met Euphemia's across the balcony entrance. For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. Then Naruto's expression softened, though not enough to hide the worry behind it. Mom, Dad, I have to go, he said into the phone. Keep me updated. And I'll handle it. A faint, tired smile crossed his face at whatever Kushina said on the other end. Yeah, love you too. He ended the call and lowered the phone. Euphemia stepped onto the balcony. Naruto. Hey, he said softly. She glanced back toward the closed doors down the hall, then to him again. I didn't mean to interrupt. You didn't. Her violet eyes searched his face. You were talking to your parents. Naruto slipped the phone into his pocket. Yeah, Dad and Mom heard about Kyushu already. Of course they did, Euphemia murmured. They're trying to get ahead of things. Naruto looked out over the city, his expression darkening again. If this turns into a real invasion, people are going to get caught in the middle fast. Euphemia moved to stand beside him near the railing. It's getting worse, she whispered. Naruto looked at her for a long moment. Then he reached for her hands and gently pulled them apart, holding one between both of his. It'll be all right, he said. Euphemia's eyes searched his face. You can't know that. No, Naruto admitted. Not for sure. His thumb brushed lightly over her knuckles, steady and warm. But I'm still saying it. Something in his tone made the tension in her face soften. It was not blind confidence. It was not denial. It was Naruto choosing to stand in front of something frightening and refuse to let it have the last word. Euphemia looked down at their joined hands. You always do that, she said quietly. Do what? Act like things can still be saved. Naruto gave a faint, tired smile. Someone has to. Her heart tightened at that. The wind moved between them, cool against her face. Beyond the balcony, the city stretched out beneath the pale sky, so polished from a distance that it almost looked peaceful. Euphemia's fingers tightened around his. I'm scared, she admitted. Naruto's expression gentled. For Suzaku? He asked. For Suzaku, she said. For Kyushu. For all the people who will suffer if this becomes worse. She hesitated, then looked up at him. And for you. Naruto blinked. Me. Yes, Euphemia said softly. Because whenever something terrible happens, you always look like you're already trying to carry it. Naruto opened his mouth. For once, he did not have an immediate joke ready. Euphemia stepped a little closer. Please don't pretend you're fine, she said. Naruto let out a slow breath through his nose. I'm not, he admitted. The honesty seemed to surprise both of them. His gaze drifted briefly toward the doors behind her, toward the room full of soldiers and nobles and orders being made from above. I'm angry, he said quietly. And tired. And really sick of watching people treat lives like pieces on a map. Euphemia lowered her eyes. Naruto squeezed her hand gently. But I'm here, he said. And so are you. She looked back up at him. He lifted his free hand and carefully brushed a loose strand of pink hair away from her cheek. Hey, he murmured. Look at me. She did. And maybe it was the fear in her eyes. Maybe it was the way the world kept trying to crush every gentle thing between them before either of them had a chance to understand what it meant. Or maybe it was just Naruto being Naruto. But before Euphemia could say anything else, he leaned in and kissed her. It was not rushed. Not desperate. Just quiet, warm, and startlingly tender. Euphemia went still in surprise for the first heartbeat. Then she melted into it. Her eyes fluttered closed as she kissed him back, one hand tightening around his without even realizing it. When they finally parted, she stared at him, wide-eyed and flushed, as if she could not decide whether to speak or simply keep breathing. Naruto looked a little surprised at himself too. Then he smiled, small and real. Told you, he said softly. It'll be all right. Euphemia let out the faintest laugh through the remains of her shock and leaned a little closer, not quite ready to let the moment go. Naruto stayed there with her, his hand still holding hers, his shoulder turned slightly toward the city as if he could somehow shield her from the war gathering beyond it. Behind them, inside Cornelia's office, the voices of soldiers and officers continued. Kyushu burned closer with every passing minute. But for one fragile moment on the balcony, Euphemia held onto Naruto's warmth and let herself believe him.